Good evening, everybody, fellow members, members of the public. It's great to see you all. I have to go through the usual stuff, which is follow us if there's anything going wrong, but I'll do it in the official text and terms. Right, so action in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the town hall, and then to the car park beyond the town hall in St Runwald Street. In the case of any disturbances which requires the Cabinet to withdraw from this room, councillors should withdraw to the Mayor's parlour using the doors behind me. I will be first through them, and await further advice. As many know, this meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, and also be available to listen to afterwards. The use of mobile phones and other devices, I shall switch mine off in a moment, including cameras by visitors is welcome, but you're requested to use them discreetly and not to disturb the meeting, to set them to silent, and to not use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones will be used at all times. Now let me introduce the work of the Cabinet. The Cabinet's the main executive body of the Council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services, and also makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 8 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I'll introduce myself and ask my colleagues to follow, including officers of the table. So my name is Councillor David King, Leader of the Council.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Mark Corey, and I'm Portfolio Holder for Resources and Member representing Wivenhoe.
Good evening. My name is Councillor Michelle Burrows. I am Local City Councillor for Wivenhoe Ward, also the Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Culture and Heritage.
Martin Goss, Marlow Ward, Neighbourhoods and Waste.
Alison J, Highwards Ward, and I'm Portfolio Holder for Economy, Transformation and Performance.
Andrea Luxford-Vaughan, Portfolio Holder for Planning and Sustainability and Ward Member for Wivenhoe.
Paul Smith, Councillor for St Anne's and St John's and Portfolio Holder for Housing.
Natalie Summers, Councillor for St Anne's and St John's and Portfolio Holder for Communities.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Molly, Chief Executive.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the agenda. Urgent items?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you, in which case we go to have your say. Now, a number of you will have been through this routine here, but we'll explain it again, that as you come to the table, have 3 minutes of response in normal circumstances, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and then a minute to reply. Councillors are untimed, but I'll ask them to use the same kind of discipline if they wouldn't mind. We have got quite a few people here, which is great. Tonight we really do have open doors at every committee, every panel and cabinet, as well as at full council. And it's important to our sense of democracy, to democracy itself, that that door is open, that you and others can speak up on the issues that matter to you. May not, quite rightly, give an answer tonight. It depends on the issue. If we can give an indication, we'll do that. And we will take away issues that require some thoughtfulness so that we can be thoughtful. We will return to the individual or address the issue in the course of normal business. Well, we have quite a few people on one subject. To avoid us, and in fairness to those who follow, repeating the same answers or a variation of them, what I will ask is that those who want to speak on a particular subject do so in sequence. If there's space at the table, that'd be great. If not, I'd welcome them coming back to the table if they want to follow up. And then I'll ask the given portfolio holder to give a response that picks up the points that have been made. So Councillor Martin Goss, for example, has got quite a few people with quite a few things to say to him and to us tonight. And we want to be listening and we want to respond, but we'll do it in that collective kind of way as a better use of your and our time. Where there are items in the agenda where somebody wants to speak, that person will come forward at that item unless they've asked to have what we call general have your say, in other words, an issue that's not in the agenda. And I've got several on that premise. So the first I have down here is Sir Bob Russell. Sir Bob, you know this really well. Please do come forward and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors. I start by saying this cabinet has no moral legitimacy. No moral legitimacy. I've followed and been aware of Colchester Council for 60 years, 6 decades, 31 years as a participant, 29 as an observer, and I've never seen anything like what we've witnessed with one party with less than a third of the councillors grabbing 100% of the seats on the cabinet. That can't be right. It simply cannot be right. I'm no longer involved in party politics in Colchester, but I have to say I'm ashamed of what's going on. I'm a founder member of the Liberal Democrats. I was proud to be this town's Member of Parliament for 18 years. We were, I thought still were, a party that believed in fairness and proportional representation. Taking all the cabinet seats is neither fair nor proportionate. What is interesting is how this scenario has come about, because the 3 main parties on the council are broadly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, broadly. And therefore, the proportionate way, the fair way, what the people voted for, they voted for 3 parties, roughly third. And it's incumbent on all elected representatives to ensure that that is reflected in the setup, the organisation that you have. Cabinet system was brought in by the Blair Labour government, and in 2011, the Liberal Democrat minister in the coalition government brought in legislation to allow councils to revert back to committees. When Colchester started out forcibly by government to have a cabinet system, there were 5 members of the cabinet, 2 Conservative, 2 Liberal Democrat and 1 Labour, which was proportionate to the representation. But those were in the days when councillors of all political persuasions managed to work together for the benefit of Colchester. I think it was in 2004, 2005, when the Conservatives with 28 councillors then took what by then was 8 cabinet positions. I would suggest that the council of 2000 had far more responsibilities than the council today, and they had 5 cabinet members. You've got 8. Reduce it back to 5. The savings you made, about £25,000, I estimate, you can give to the citizen advice, people at the front line, helping the people of Colchester. So I end by saying this council has no moral justification. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sir Bob. And I actually do mean that, because you will be expressing as ever what you think. I looked at the High Steward's role, and once it was to direct, well, that would have been interesting. But today it's to advise, and I shall take your counsel to us as your advice. We have had some exchanges on these kinds of matters before. If I take the issue of whether it is better to govern through a cabinet or whether it's better to govern through a committee, and I have a measure of empathy for that, which is why the style, certainly I can talk for the year which I've been leader, has very much been consultative and inclusive and cooperative, and building consensus from alumni to former leaders to the ways in which we've been working on the key issues, which is why, and you do watch the council, you do follow how we work, you will know there's often been a sitting on hands rather than an outright opposition on some of the issues that could be contentious. So the style, and we work within the framework we have, the style we have, perhaps the best of what you touch on. I have talked to former leaders and councillors of past times about what has been, in their view, more effective. I have to say, without exception, and they may all be wrong, Sir Bob, they have all said to me, Cabinet has been a better way of managing and delivering the business of the council. That's the views of others. I'm saying this genuinely. I've cross-checked from my own degree of comfort. But working with the system that we have of cabinet government, we have to form an administration. You know the reality is that we're expressed and seen running up to and at the forming of the administration. There had to be one. There was no alternative put forward to a Liberal Democrat administration, and that was supported by other parties. Not everybody, I accept, but it was supported openly across the chamber. So we do have legitimacy in the most central of ways, which is that we commanded when we needed to the support of the chamber. And I would argue, and I have, as you know, also said that the legitimacy comes from other things. It comes from what you're doing and how you're doing it. So we're taking the budget, the strategic plan, the agreements of full council towards the end of last year. We're taking those through because somebody has to, so that's us. And the way that we're working is I've just described this: inclusive, collective, cooperative, wherever we can. And you will see that in the year ahead. It's already started. To the extent that we can, I've already agreed areas where the degree of difference between all the parties, including opposition, is so small, and the best way to work on the big issues is together, including things that you're not so keen about, Sir Bob, like master planning and regeneration across the city, a conversation for another time. We're doing that together. We're doing that together in lots of ways, including with other local authorities, as with tendering Colchester Borders Gun Community. And in terms of the structure inside the council, I can't do anything about the fact that our Labour partners and friends were unable to get the agreement of the National Executive Committee to join us. But I have put in place arrangements with shadows to the cabinet members, and distribution of chairs to our Labour colleagues that represents their publicly stated support for this administration. So for me, this may not be ideal, it clearly isn't, but it is a practical way of delivering what we need, which is an administration that we require. And it will be in the spirit I've described. Thank you. You have 1 minute. You want to come back?
Chairman, I'm not going to accept that yes, Minister response. You brought up the position of the Labour councillors. I haven't, but as you have, there are 4 Labour councillors here. I hope one of them will come forward and explain why they are taking orders from Labour Party headquarters. Their bosses are the people who voted for them. They should be responding to the people who voted for them, not to party headquarters. And how long has that been going on? Let me just conclude. Today is the 50th anniversary of the elections, the first elections to the district council, the merger of the historic borough, villages of Lixon Winstry, and the urban districts of West Mersey and Wivenhoe. That council was quite happy, as indeed all councils I've known up until the cabinet system, to work collaboratively. And that is how the cabinet system started off. 5 members, 2 Conservative, 2 Liberal Democrat, 1 Labour. I cannot understand why 51 councillors cannot put the people of Colchester before their party games. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Paul. Louise, Davy, and Linda Gain, this is a very different issue, but you're really as welcome as Sir Bob was to speak to what you find and the issues of concern. I understand netball courts and Highwoods, right, so over to you. Thank you very much. 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. You've already introduced us, so I don't need to do that. I'm asking councillors for their support to encourage officers to provide more urgency to the repairs required at the outdoor netball courts at Highwood Sports Centre. We currently have over 50 adult teams and 40 youth teams playing weekly in the league, which along with coaches and umpires could equate to 1,000 participants per week if the facility was fully functional. There's been an ongoing issue with these courts since 2018, where over the years the surfaces and floodlights have stopped working. And last year we were lucky enough that funding was identified for court resurfacing and floodlight replacement. Unfortunately, a block of courts were only cleaned and resurfaced, and when wet were unusable and haven't been in use since September. In February, 3 of the new floodlights failed, so we feel we're back to square one. We push for the remaining courts to be resurfaced and floodlights to be repaired, and assure this is in hand, but the frustrating thing is the timelines are always very loose and they're subject to change all the time. There seems to be no urgency. We were told the court resurfacing could take to the end of September. Why, when the school holidays start in July, could they not be finished by the beginning of September? The leagues and clubs make sure that primarily, but not exclusively, women, young adults and children from all backgrounds have the opportunity to train, play and develop, not just as netball players, but coaches, officials, future administrators, so netball or physical activity becomes a habit for life, contributes to their physical health, mental health and provides life skills as well. We run central venue leagues because that's the best format. It promotes car sharing, sharing officials, aids workforce development, a great socialiser and a safe environment for participants, some as young as year 2. We also have coaches and umpires in their 70s, so it's an intergenerational project as well. These examples show that we contribute to the City Council's strategy area, creating safe, healthy and active communities. But without a fully fit purpose facility being provided, is this actually contributing to the cause of inequality? There are no other suitable facilities in the city, and we've highlighted this in the Plain Pitch strategy consultation. We would like to be assured that a maintenance programme is in place so we are not faced with these issues every year, or that a new development is explored at the sports park, so we can continue to provide physical activity opportunities, develop volunteers and contribute as a community asset. Please could we encourage councillors to encourage officers to prioritise these repairs to be completed by the end of August, so we can start the leagues fully on time and begin to plan our new areas of development. Please could we ask that you update us by the end of the month or by July, when your next meeting might be. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for yours. Does your colleague want to speak as well?
I think just to touch on what Linda said, I think the fact that this has been happening since 2018 and the impact, I think, hasn't, we were worried about the time, but hasn't been displayed in this. And that's, the frustrations from the women and how the ongoing delay has impacted them and what they feel it shows on them, that they're sort of at a disadvantage again. It's women's sport that is being sort of put at the lowest priority once again. That, it maybe not that case, but that's the message that's being sent to these women and has been being sent since 2018, when we've been fighting for a very long time to sort of get a functioning facility.
Thank you very much. I'll ask my colleagues to come back on this, but I'll just start with simply saying, a big thank you to what you do, you and your colleagues do. For anybody who's watching, the link between mental and physical health and that sense of connection that all of life needs for a measure of happiness, let alone fitness. It's wonderful what you and your colleagues do. I'd love to come and see you. That would be really good. I've lost the skill of basketball, but I might better play a bit. Okay, let me go to my colleagues. I'll start with Michelle, and Alison's taken a close interest, but between them we'll give you a response and come back to you afterwards.
Thank you very much, Louise and Linda. I'm goal defence, by the way, so if you've got a spare place, I'd love to take that up. I absolutely applaud the work that you are doing to encourage physical engagement and activity for life, and understand all the life skills around the sport that you're promoting, and love the intergenerational work that you say you do. And I will actively champion this, most definitely. I have a meeting with Adam Britton, who is Head of Leisure, next week. And just to be clear, you want some feedback about the maintenance plan that's going to go ahead, hopefully, and you'd like some information about the lights and being repaired. Is that right? And you'd like some feedback by the end of the month? Okay. My understanding from my colleague, Councillor Jay, is that although the work has been delayed, it is scheduled for August, subject to the school, as the courts are owned by the school. Councillor Jay says she's happy to attend a match next Thursday. I'm really sorry I can't attend that because I teach a yoga class on a Thursday evening myself, intergenerational. Also, yes, I said I'm meeting with Adam Britton, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can with all that information. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that's a help. We'll get on this. If we can do better than that timeline, there are often reasons why it is when it is, but we'll make sure you understand those. But if we can improve the timeline, we will. And we all accept absolutely the real importance of having clarity forward. You know, I remember getting involved in this, I think in 2018, to try and get things to move then. So what anybody needs, wherever they are across the city, in terms of a reliance on the city council, is to know clearly what help you can get, when it's going to come, and then get it delivered. And that's part of the kind of good quality communication we should have. So I'm sorry if we've fallen a bit under that, but as you can hear, we're aware and we're on it. So thank you very much.
Sorry, could I just say that also there was an opportunity, big opportunity that was missed when the sports park was built, that there was no discussions with netball, and that would have been an ideal opportunity to have a female-only sport that is predominantly male-focused sports up at the sports park with rugby, football and cycling, but that's something else that perhaps could be looked at as if there's an opportunity there as well.
Thank you. I mean, the sports park's doing superbly well. It's got that one great thing that you always need, which is space. So we'll put it on the shopping list of things to have a conversation around and come back to you about. Michelle?
Just so I can go fully informed, would I be able to have a copy of that so I can take? Thank you.
I'll send you it, but if I send it to Richard, and then he can send it forward.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Louise. The next speaker we have on General Have Your Say is Petra. I hope I got that right, Peter. Vera. Good to see you again. You'll need to use the microphone if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you very much for having me again. And well, today I would like to pass the product I've been doing, and as well as I talked to you before, that was doing the plastic and the sand mix to create some bricks or to do tiles. Now these two in special, they traveled with me from Colchester to Aberdeen, and way back being thrown by the people on the floor to test the resistance. And as you can see, they're still alive. And I don't know if you know, but I have been cycling from Colchester to Aberdeen. I meant to go to further up, but the financial problems to achieve that. But I would like you to please feel them, see them. This one will look much better, but I'll try to press it just in my house, and yeah, it just that would just pass too much. But now I've been in several regions in UK, and I tell you what, this is a beautiful country, and the nature is absolutely gorgeous. Now, a couple of things I've seen is the plastic was everywhere. You know, it's unfortunately we have a massive contamination. I have applied for a grant with the lottery, but they did not accept it because it was not related to nature. But I did argue that because many animals are dying because they're swallowing the plastics. Ourselves, we are having a massive problem with the plastics. So there is an issue, but it seems they think there is not a problem in nature. Now, what I'm asking is the help from you guys to get a small place to build a small recycling center as a pilot. You know, to be honest, I think this would be a really good idea. I know you guys are doing the best way you can, but you know, we need to see in different ways to use the plastic. You know, and it doesn't cost me anything because the sand will come from the glass. So there is no extras. The only thing I have problems is me getting the problem, the financial bit, and a little bit a place where to work. If I get, for example, one place like that, or this size, these two, it can easily be enough to start running up as a pilot. We're talking about 1 ton per day, but at least is something we'll be doing, you know. But we can start with that. That is small, but I need a place. Yeah, basically that. And I wanted to show you the bricks, how strong they are. I wanted to go outside with you, but guys, but we cannot test it outside, you know. But this is what really I wanted to show you. I changed the name from Pachamama to Change Recycle. So we have a Facebook. I have done the GoFundMe page as well. So I haven't done much on raising funding because I was just going fast as I can, but people have to stop me, and there is small seats in different places. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much for coming to see us again. Without exception, I know that remembering the last conversation, and I'm sure the views are the same, we admire anybody who cares about the mess that much of the modern world is in, from tiny particulate to the more obvious litter we can see around, and would all be in favour of what can be done to transform waste into something that's usable. I think that's the shared ground. The challenge is more the cost effectiveness of the alternative methods and technologies that are out there to convert waste into something that can be recycled. There's progress being made on that, but it may be a question of timing. It may not be necessarily the case that it's one for us. Did you want to talk about that? I'll refer to Councillor Corey.
Hi, Peter. It is a great initiative you're trying to start here. I can't remember if we've seen each other via the Climate Alliance in Colchester, because that could be one of the first places to go. So the Climate Alliance was a number of different projects coming together, and they managed to get a premises through one of the policies of where business rates would be reduced for somebody to give a free building to them. And they've been able to work together to advance projects. And I do wonder whether that would be the best place to see how other people have taken projects from the home and scaled up. In terms of assets in Colchester and what we can help with, it is limited, but we can't show favouritism, even when we believe in your kind of project, the whole point of it. But we can always have a look and give advice. But I do think, to start off with, the Colchester Climate Alliance, and I can always share details via Richard Clifford if you want, to make sure that you're linked up with other people in the same sort of position who are trying to do similar things, and more than happy to support. The one other thing I'd say is that kind of material is what our highways should be using to fill potholes, rather than perhaps the sort of old traditional method. We should be looking at how we use recyclates rather than constantly polluting. I know they do recycle some of the tarmac, but we need to be heading in that kind of direction. But thank you, and hopefully I can share those details.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Smith. Paul.
Thank you, yes. I'm not sure if it's already been suggested, but there's also Colby, the Colchester Business Enterprise Agency, which does support start-up businesses. And again, the officers will be able to put you in touch with that. And they also may be able to link in to some of the funding that's available through the various community schemes that might help with the business startups, because they're best placed to know exactly which funds are going to be best fitted for your particular environmental concerns. So that might be, again, another use of that. And I wish you every success with the project. Thank you.
Thank you both. I hope that's good counsel. We'll connect you up after this meeting through Richard, if that's all right, Peter, and all the very best to you. Thank you for coming to see us. If you have a response, briefly.
Yes, I tried with Colby and it was a little bit a nightmare. So when I've been referred, the guy was start arguing with me and I was just leaving it. But however, I did have further advice, and now the business plan has been emailed to you guys. Okay. And what I said, obviously, I'm looking for 760,000, but if I get the premises and then the rest, we can just go very low. And I think as a pilot, as I said, it would be awesome.
All right, Peter, thank you. We'll look, if you've written into us, we'll obviously, officers will come back to you,
thank you,
and wrap the advice into the response. Thank you very much for your work. Next, have your say is Councillor Warnes on graffiti, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to have to ad-lib this. I had the email to Martin open on my phone for most of this meeting. Now it's disappeared and I can't find it. so I apologise whether I've accidentally pressed the delete button. Not that I would do that to you, Martin, but if you could read it out and then if I could be able to respond. Thank you.
It's almost like reversing roles. Please can the portfolio holder for neighbourhoods and waste arrange a meeting to include myself with the responsible post holders in both councils, neighbourhoods teams and Colchester Police with a view to taking a deep dive into how and what is needed when reporting incidents of graffiti with the police to help break down barriers that hamper enforcement action.
Thank you for doing that, Martin. Basically, we've got a long-standing problem in the ward that I represent. It may well replicate elsewhere, but we have a prolific tag artist, if you could call them that, a tagger, that considerable resources from the street care team have gone into, and I've had to back up myself and physically remove to try and keep on top of this situation. And the problem I'm finding is when, obviously, I can't go on doing that forever, and nor should I. I'm just a volunteer. I'm not a paid member of staff, but obviously they are being overwhelmed at times. So I need to know that the relevant incidents are being logged in a way that the police are able to actually use them. And it's not just a case of ringing them up and telling them there's a problem. It has to be done in a certain way because there has to be a crime, there has to be a victim, there has to be a statement from the victim, there has to be evidence. And I first raised this when Councillor Bev Oxford was actually the portfolio holder, and I was told it would be resolved then, and the problem continues, and it appears to be around an issue of resources. I'm being told that it's too onerous for officers to be able to report every incident through the Police 101 system, and the police are saying they need it to be reported in the way that I've previously described. I understand that you don't have to ring up and report every single instance. You can report online and you can log several at once, and it takes seconds, not the minutes that I was told. But I need to break this logjam. So you would be good enough to arrange for the relevant post holders in both our service and the police to sit with me and yourself. I could explain the issues, and hopefully we can reach some agreement and try to resolve this issue to the benefit of my community, which I do represent. Sir Bob, thank you.
Graffiti is something that really is the bane of, I think, many of our lives, and it doesn't just happen in Beerchurch, it happens in Mile End, it happens in Stanway, it happens in every ward in Colchester. So it's not specific just to your area, it is specific to every part of Colchester, including Mersey, Dedham, etc. It happens everywhere. However, you are right that some areas have more prolific graffiti tagging than others, and there have been some high-profile cases where some people have been caught. Having spoken to the police about this on a number of occasions, and also having been heavily involved with Neighbourhood Watch for over a decade, the challenge is that you have to catch the people doing it at the time. And that's one of the big issues. And then, as you quite rightly say, if there are other tags that are recorded online, and I do believe the police have a database of these, you can then potentially link those other crimes. But in terms of taking people to court and prosecuting, it's quite difficult because they have to be caught doing it. And some people have been caught doing it. They've been caught with the spray cans, so that's evidence. It will have fingerprints on it. They can probably track back to the retailers where they bought them from, because most retailers have CCTV, but all of that takes time. And then, of course, a case has got to be prepared. And then, of course, the CPS has to agree to actually prosecute, because in some cases, as with police cuts and CPS cuts, they only do the most serious cases. So from looking at it from the police's point of view, I can see why it takes time to prosecute and also to get the right evidence, otherwise the case falls apart and won't even end up in court. So there have been some people charged, fined, even threatened with prison, but then of course those tags appear again, and the same tagger that I think was caught several years ago and prosecuted, unless someone else is impersonating those tags, is at it again, but I can't prove that, and it's all circumstantial. So that's the long answer, but yes, I will pick it up, because like you, I spend many hours going around removing graffiti. I even did some today at lunchtime at the bottom of Mile End Road I spotted. So I carry graffiti wipes in my car and I do remove tags a week, which takes the load off the team. In terms of the team, we have one full-time operative that just does graffiti all the time. Obviously, we do divert them off to other work that might be higher priority, but it is a full-time job for at least one person, if not probably two. But we did centralise that team to make it more effective, but I will pick it up.
Thank you for your considered response. Obviously, you are aware that I have decades' experience working in the field of housing and antisocial behaviour included. And of course, whilst I understand you're talking about a criminal prosecution and the burden of evidence it being beyond reasonable doubt, and you do have to catch them and then you can link evidence. But of course, this council has extensive powers through various antisocial behaviour acts, and that is the balance of probability. And I think there is more that we can do. And yes, I waited 2 years, that's a long while, and I realise you're in a similar situation. And yes, I am a councillor, a full-time job, I have a family, and I'm also volunteering. Like yourself, backing up when officers become overwhelmed. So if we could put our pedal to the metal and try to resolve this situation, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Are there any others who want, at this late stage, to come forward for a general have your say? If not, then we go on to the rest of the main agenda. And I know we have some more speakers when we get to item. So, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from Cabinet members, please? That's a no. Minutes of the previous meeting. Cabinet's invited to confirm that minutes of the meeting held on 12th of April are correct record. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Decisions reviewed by the scrutiny panel.
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And we go on to neighbourhoods and waste. And we've got a number of fellow councillors who are going to come up. As I said earlier, to be effective, I ask you if you wouldn't mind, please, to come have your say, and then be joined by colleagues who can add to this. And then I'll ask Martin to give you a composite reply, and I'll round that off if that's necessary. So a conversation. But we'll do it in those two steps, if that's okay, please. So I've got Councillor Dave Harris. And Dave, I think you're coming in, you're zooming in. So you start us off.
Thank you very much, Leader. And good evening, one and all. It's nice to join you remotely, albeit a busy day. I thought I would add my voice to you, Leader, and to the Cabinet over this subject, the garden waste service. As you know, you have probably as much emails in your inbox as I do in a given week, and this subject has dominated in the last few weeks. The fallout is all over the city until people realise, of course, as they must and will do, I'm guessing, with your communications team on side, about the impact of the financial dire situation we have for ourselves. But we all have to represent our residents, don't we? Both those without the brown wheelie bins and those with. Some residents have existing wheelie bins and may or may not, as you will see from the report, want to take up the new option with charges that have a sticker on the bin. Those who will take them up, like myself, will do so, because you've already said in the report that you can do it with neighbours, and that's something I intend to investigate with my neighbours, and they are on side with that, and that will be a good way of working together in the community. But some may not want to take up the option, and they don't want those charges. Now, those who choose not to are left with a brain wheelie bin on their property, within their curtilage, and the report you've got here, Leader, offers a pickup of those, which is great, but some may keep them as there is no incentive to give them back to you. They are quite robust, these bins, aren't they? They're very strong. Mine we've had since day one when you issued it to it as a resident in the Brownie Wheelie Bins area. So they last years, I think. And page 17 of your report, Leader, talks about adjusting the scheme as you go along, which I'm hoping that will happen, and I'm sure it will. Those on non-wheelie bins may want to avail themselves of those bins. They're going to be charged. But the original consort, like myself, have never had to pay. If I want to give my brown wheelie bin back to you, which I don't, but if I do, it seems to me that 19 or 20 or 30,000 people that have got wheelie bins could be offered a small incentive to return the brown bin and release more bins, because I've said they're already robust and they can be recycled and given to other people who do want them. And although you're going to charge them for that, but that's fine, but it saves the council more money because you're actually going to recycle a bin that would have been sitting in somebody's back garden that you're using for storage for things. If you give a small feedback again, they may avail themselves and give you some savings. What I'm talking about, Leader, is parity really with those that are wanting the service and those who do not. The stickers are a great idea, but you don't want to waste your money. As an addendum to that, Leader, I thought I'd better make the case about lots of people have said to me at the end of the lots of emails I've had about the increase of possible fly tipping of garden waste and hotspots where this may happen. A question I put to you in writing, Leader, when I notified you this question, would Cabinet consider extra fly tipping signage to prevent that happening, and a campaign of public engagement of how antisocial it is to fly tipping in our own community public open spaces? I don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. And 99.99% of my residents don't want to see that either, because we care. So frequently asked questions are at the back. So I've seen the answers to the questions you've posed could be there. So I would add one on there about what would happen to me if I want to give my wheelie bin back. And I'm hoping that you'll find a way to adjust the scheme, as it says on page 17 on item 2.3, that you can give some parity to those with and without bins so that they can actually regenerate those and recycle those bins into other areas. I hope that can be adjusted in, and I'm hoping you'll listen to the public. Finally, I would say, Leader, it's still not got the message to the most of the people in Colchester that we're in dire straits financially. That needs to get out, because although we're catching up with others in the Essex area who do charge for wheelie bins, we've got to make sure that people know why you're doing this. And although it says it in the local paper, I think we need to say it and say it and say it again until we all understand why you have to do this and why you've got no other options, Leader. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Dave. Very well said, and thank you for the formal and earlier notice. That's always helpful for us to be clear about the questions you've raised. As I say, I'll work through others, I think, so that we get a whole sense of this. This is repetition for some, but I have no problem with that. It's you adding your weight to the issues, and I'll ask Martin to go through them together. Thank you for adding your weight on the point about comms and what's driving us here, which is financial necessity. And absolutely, we understand the importance of being clear about not only what the service is and listening as we make those final decisions, but why we're having to do it. And we will be clear about that and repeatedly. comms being prepared on that. We'll be back on that subject. Let me go to the next speaker. So Councillor Bickersteth, I think she's here also by Zoom.
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Thank you.
So I'd like to speak on behalf of Highwoods residents and other residents who are in the same position as residents in Highwoods. And whilst I welcome the fact that we've got the chance to have wheelie bins, which will relieve some of the pressures on the people who have to collect them because of the injuries they cause, my question is, how will you ensure that the introduction of the garden waste collection scheme via wheelie bins is equitable on a cost basis in those areas where, as in Highwoods, residents have not previously been included in a wheelie bin collection system at all, and therefore they'll be charged to have a wheelie bin in addition to the charge for using the garden waste service itself. The £30 charge for the wheelie bin represents quite a hefty proportion of the garden charge itself. 54% of the annual charge they will be charged for having a wheelie bin, and this will have a disproportionate impact on lower income families, which I think we need to take into consideration. And I am aware of the need to raise the income, but I also think this could deter some people from taking up the offer as well. And I do feel that for residents who have been denied the choice to have a voice in the collection services in the past, I think it's a real negative impact on them to again have this. They will have no choice. They will have, if they have no choice in paying for the bin. And as has building on what my colleague Councillor Harris has just said, if that was combined with a scheme whereby there could be some recycling of the bins, is there some leeway there to have a perhaps more creative solution to avoiding having this imposition of the charge on residents who are in the position that they have no wheelie bin that they can use, whether if they want the service? That's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We hear that very clearly. We understand, of course, there's always a background. So Highwoods chose not to have wheelie bins, but we are where we are, we head where we head. The issues of equity and the best balance of judgment is something we're going to talk through. I'm sure in scrutiny and elsewhere, we'll be very reflective about that. So thank you very much for your view. Let me go to Councillor Scordis. Lee, I think you're also coming through online.
I am, Chair, I am, and would be there in person, but recovering from COVID. So I'll try and be as articulate as I can be on this. Firstly, thanks to Councillor Goss, who got back to me on some of my questions, which was really helpful. I guess I really just want to highlight some of the concerns I've got around this early on. So what we are selling is a product. We have to admit that. We live in a consumer age and we are selling a product. And it does still slightly concern me that we are doing the big implementation during January when pickups will be lowest. For example, you don't sell Easter eggs in November. So it does concern me. I understand why, because obviously we decided this at budget and we need the funding and so forth. But I do worry that the timing will get smaller pickup than we hope. The second one is around the cost as well. £55 does seem quite a lot for introducing this immediately, because we are throwing this in people's faces essentially. And my worry is that it does put people off. So while we need the funding, the worry is that we do charge too much and we get fewer customers than we would like. And that means we make less of a return than we actually need to. So I do wonder if we need to look at that, whether we looked at £52 and we could say it's a pound a week, but at the moment it's more than that as it stands. I do agree with the mid-season offer. I think that's a really good idea, because obviously that's when we'll start picking up business, and the early adapter idea as well. My view is, again, looking at it from a retail standpoint, you want to be looking at 18 months, not 14 and a half months. And I understand the 14 and a half months is to bring it in line with the financial year, but residents, customers don't look at it like that. And we're not scrapping it after, as far as I'm aware. So it would make sense to me that you look at, well, essentially what retail does is where you do an 18-month offer, not just offering 2.5 extra months when, again, the weather might not be very good. People might not be putting rubbish out. And the last one, Leader, is just on the compost schemes. So there are some compost schemes that do exist, but the council isn't aware of them. And I'm sure councillors, we can help them get in touch with the officers. But for me, there does seem an opportunity here to work with a lot of allotment societies who I'm sure would welcome a lot of the green waste that Colchester residents in their neighbourhood have to offer. So for residents that don't want to pay up to this scheme, but we obviously do not want to see this green waste going into black bags or bonfires, this gives them another option and gives us another plus option as a council. But I'll leave it there, Leader. I'm sure plenty of others have more to add.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. Again, very clear. Thank you. Good luck with getting over COVID. Martin will come back on your point in a moment. Councillor Sue Lissamore. Sue.
Lovely. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I believe the introduction of the garden waste charges is short-sighted due to the Environment Act, which the government is currently implementing. This Act stipulates that the government are looking at introducing a statutory duty to collect garden waste, and a consultation response is due any day. Why then implement this with all the costs involved when it could be overturned in the very near future? The report in 5.4 recommends home composting. There is an art to this, and there is a great difference between producing compost and producing a smelly sludge. If someone regularly just adds lawn clippings, for example, then this will not produce a compost. Residents also need the room to do this. You've added links to Essex County Council help pages, but this will only show what you need to do to produce usable compost. If you don't have the materials to do that, compost is not going to magically appear. The report in 5.4 also recommends taking garden waste to the recycling centre. That seems to be the answer to most issues here at Colchester City Council. Let's transfer the burden onto Essex County Council instead of ourselves. Job done. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not job done. We still have to pay for this service through our taxes, and yet you're happy to just transfer that burden to ECC. This also does not take into account extra vehicle journeys. I thought we were trying to reduce journeys. This does not correlate with the Greenest Council that you say you are trying to promote. In 7.2, there are still many residents who do not want or who cannot handle wheelie bins. You are forcing this upon them when you have said many times in the past that you will not. Where do they store them? How do they handle them if elderly or disabled? You should have continued offering an either-or scheme and kept the option of using the existing white sacks. I know why, because the operatives prefer wheelie bins. But that is just turning the maintenance and carrying of the receptacle onto the resident. They would now be cleaning them and moving them. My genuine concern about this whole report is the issue of it being cost effective. There are so many what ifs. And whilst I'd like to see flexibility when it comes to residents, flexibility is not the friend of balancing accounts. You say you need to do this to pay for the service and to generate income, yet you have no idea what the take-up will be. This is reinforced by some comments in the report. 5.23 say there may be offers, but we don't know when or how much. 5.28 says the fleet will change subject to speed of uptake and geography of growth. 5.29 says you will have to hire vehicles in the growing season, but not sure how many. 5.31 states the vehicles may not be of low emissions. 5.34 looks very promising by introducing hydro-treated vegetable oil fuel to ensure that the service has less emissions. But this fuel costs more than diesel. As you have no idea how much money you will generate for garden waste, that looks highly unlikely to go ahead. 6.2 states that no profit will be made until 2025-26. What happens if the government then turns around and says you've got to offer it free anyway? All that done in 23-24 and 24-25 would be a loss and would never catch up and be paid back. In 6.8, it says you will be borrowing to achieve the balance you need. So this council will be paying for this borrowing for many years to come. I cannot find any reference in your document to those properties that do not have space for wheelie bins or who live in terraced housing and cannot get a bin easily from the front to the back and vice versa. Does that mean there is now no alternative for these households? Wheelie bin or nothing? In your questions at the end of the document, you make the point of if someone dies, there is no further payment taken, but there is no refund. If they pass away on the day after payment, then they'll pay for the whole year. A refund should be made available. In conclusion, I know that what your answer is going to be. If we don't do this, then where else can we save money? I understand that. The majority of residents understand that. However, what you have here is a finger in the air report that cannot identify any surety that this will be cost effective. We'll have to borrow to deliver it, and which may be scrapped anyway in the future due to the Environment Bill. And are we forgetting why garden waste collections were introduced in the first place? To reduce the amount of garden waste going back into black bags and therefore not being recycled. Many residents will now just put their waste in a black bag, and nowhere in this report can I see any budgeting for the increasing volume of black bags and the additional cost to clear up the fly tipping and bonfires. However, at scrutiny last night, it was discussed, and you are upping your figures, meaning that you believe an extra 640 tonnes of waste will be going to landfill. 640 tonnes. You are also reducing your target on recycling from 55% to 53%, as discussed last night. How disappointing when some councils recycle 70%, and you have always said that this is where you want Colchester to be. We added this to the Prettygate Facebook site, and we had over 100 comments, all against. This is short-sighted, too expensive, and does nothing for this council's green credentials. I never thought I'd say this, but I actually wish the Labour group was sitting around this table here tonight, as perhaps they, like with the freighter service issue last calendar year, would have reduced the costs or even perhaps voted against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. That's a long piece. Bear with me a second. And that's a very long piece with an awful lot of points. Excuse me if I say it, rather polemic in their nature. We will, of course, have to respond, like everybody does, to how government set policy. Like councils down the land, Conservative, of course, many of them, garden waste charges are a practical reality given underfunding from government. So I'll give you a polemic back. It's a factual one, which is we're doing this because the position we're being placed in by government. Now, we're going to make the very best of that. And those points you've made, which we can look at, Sue, which are about alternatives and choices, we'll have a look at that, where we can strengthen the paper in a way to make it clearer to those who are going to be the eventual recipients of the service. We'll do that. Where Martin can make some adjustments and make it a better service, we'll do it. But the reason we're here, the only reason we're here, is because we've been placed in this kind of position. And we're going to do in a cross-party way, best we can, work our way out of it, consistent with the conversations we had when the budget was set earlier this year. But no, thank you. We'll pick through your points and see what we can respond later or after we leave this place. Thank you, Sue. Councillor Chris Pearson.
Evening, everyone. Evening, Leader.
Evening, Chris.
One of the comments that I was going to make this evening was about equity of the charges, given that parts of the city weren't issued with wheelie bins years ago. And I have to say, as a resident of Prettygate, I was very disappointed, as were the neighbours I spoke with, my neighbours at the time, that we weren't consulted by our local councillors about whether or not we should have wheelie bins, because I think most of us would have had them when they were rolled out to the rest of the city at that time, although it was suggested that the residents of Prettygate didn't want them. So I think the point's been made about equitability of charges around those of us who don't have a garden waste wheelie bin at the moment, and the additional charge that there would be. Because I think most of my neighbours would certainly be prepared to go along with what's in this paper in terms of a garden waste charge, but are a little bit miffed that there's an additional charge for a bin. I like the points that are made in the paper about encouraging composting, and I think that's very good. I would just like to point out that in 5.5 it refers to a garden composter being less than half price. When I went through the link, in fact, the Essex County Council site that's linked to suggests that you can buy one, get one half price, not buy a composter for half price. So I think we need to be honest with the residents of Colchester City that they can't get a half price composter. The other thing that I wanted to raise this evening as well was just around the vehicles that are being suggested. The fleet transition plan that's referred to in the document is now best part of 3 years old, and alternative fuels are moving apace. So rather than just looking at electric vehicles, I would suggest that we might also want to look at hydrogen-fueled vehicles if they are available. If we're talking about replacing the fleet on an ongoing basis, and the fact that we would have our own fleet to supply, support, and manage, hydrogen might be a more cost-effective and certainly a more environmentally friendly way of producing a fleet that can do the business for us. I think, we're all aware that central government funding has forced this decision on the City Council. We just need to ensure that the implementation meets the needs in the fairest possible way of most, if not all, of the residents of Colchester when we do it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Councillor Willits is next, if that's... Chris, I'll invite you back with others if you need to make a supplementary point. Dennis, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Leader. I think we're getting to the point where we're starting to repeat each other now, in endless series of repeats, just like some television channels. So I will try and sort of steer clear of what's already been said. If we look back over the last decade, Leader, there are very few clear achievements which this council could up. Yes, the PR department takes various events and portrays them as superb achievements, but the only one which I think is really honest is that, as we discussed last night at scrutiny, over the course of the last 10 years, the recycling rate in this borough, then city, has gone up from where we were bottom of the Essex League to where we were middle of the Essex League, and looking, I'm not quite sure how good the statistics are, but trying to find them this morning, suggested that we might even be well above the halfway point at the moment. But I mean, that is not really the issue. The issue is that those achievements, much of which was being carried out by Martin Goss, give him credit, has been because we have rigorously collected and recycled garden waste. And of course, we've rigorously collected and recycled food waste. And that is the reason why we have been able as a council to make these very significant achievements in our recycling. And therefore, I find it rather sad that we are now proposing to undermine those achievements which the council has made by moving away from a system which encourages people to recycle the maximum by not charging them. Now, we know Colchester City Council is in a desperate position for cash, not my fault. The administration is providing too many services. The cash is spread too thinly. And when that happens, you're bound to be in the position that you're desperate to get cash from anywhere, even if it means undermining one's successes of the past. Speaking from a personal point of view, I've got a fairly large garden. I pay a mansion tax to your good treasurer, and I believe that that tax should cover the essential public services. And I believe that recycling of our waste is one of those essential public services which should be paid for out of our basic council tax. I believe it is frightfully important. I regret that the current strategic plan does not raise this as one of the top priorities. That is my personal view, clearly not shared by members of the cabinet, but certainly shared by everyone who takes a view that environmental concerns are priority, and that doing anything which reduces recycling is a crime, in my view, although clearly not a statutory crime, purely a moral one, Leader. Now, I think the whole of this scheme is based on some fairly dicey statistics. If you cast your mind back, Leader, to the time when we were doing the budget, a nominal sum was put in for the revenue that we expected from garden waste. And when we looked at that carefully, we noted that introducing garden waste, whether we're prepared to admit it this evening or not, will result in more fly tipping, it will result in more burning of waste. And because of that, we will need an increased, not a decreased number of enforcement officers to deal with the miscreants. And of course, they're going to be few in number, but they will cause a serious problem in their neighbourhoods. So the budget was revised so that we didn't have to decrease the number of environment officers dealing with smoke nuisances and fly tipping nuisances. In fact, they were actually, you'll recall, Leader, it was said that we were going to have more of them. And as a result of that, the income needed from this scheme was substantially increased. And the 7,053 in the first part of the first season is really difficult to understand. I don't know where these people are. Many people will sign up. I sincerely hope they will sign up. Some will compost, but we're inevitably going to have burning of waste. Mile End will just be a smog. And we're going to have fly tipping in the country areas. And both those nuisances will have to be dealt with. An increased number of environment officers paid for out of this revenue or paid for out of other revenues, resulting in other services being reduced. At scrutiny panel, as Councillor Lismore so rightly said, we were looking at some of the impacts which you are already anticipating as a result of the proposal that you're proposing this evening on residential household waste to landfill. For the first time, we're seeing a proposal that more waste will be going to landfill. 346 kilograms per household this year, going up to 354 next year. Why? Well, we know that the black bags, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, surplus black bag capacity is going to be stuffed with garden waste by people whose budgets are under pressure and rightly are looking for a way not to have to subscribe to this rather expensive service. The other statistic we looked at was household waste reused and recycled, down from 55% down to 53%. The first time we've had a reduction in our recycling rate, albeit a small one, it's still a reduction. First time in a decade that our recycling performance is going down. Why is it going down? Well, less is going to be recycled. More of the things that we've recycled in the past, like garden waste, are going to be dumped, fly tipped, or disposed of in antisocial way. But let me come to what I consider to be the worst aspect of the scheme as it is presented to us, a crass scheme, and that is the refusal of Cabinet to get to grips with electric vehicles. The whole world is turning over to electric vehicles because of their environmental credentials. My latest Amazon order was delivered in an electric vehicle, admittedly not a 40-ton freighter, but it was certainly a sort of 15-ton odd truck. And we know that other administrations are buying electric vehicles. And there is complete failure of this administration to get to grips with the climate emergency. There is a scheme which sets out how we're going to transition the vehicle fleet to either electric or, as was suggested, hydrogen. But we know there is no will at all at the moment to install charging points at Shrub End. There is no will at all at the moment to install hydrogen storage facilities and all the refrigeration plant that goes with it at Shrub End. And really, this is a huge environmental cop-out. Those of the environmental lobby who would have supported this scheme will presumably not support it because you are not going to use electric vehicles. And I think that is quite disgusting. You're wriggling, you're squirming, you're ducking and you're diving, leader, anything to avoid the cost of electric vehicles just because it's a few bob more than the clapped out old fleet that you're proposing to use on this particular scheme. So, Leader, I think there are valid reasons why this scheme is going to fail. There are valid reasons why those in the environment lobby will say this is really a worthless scheme. I know you're going to proceed with it, but I just say shame, Leader, that we get to the point of having to introduce schemes like this when circumstances do not compel us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Do stay for a second. I will pick up a couple of these points, but again, with respect, this is somewhat like Sue's point. It's an interesting polemic and combination. I'll ask Martin, when he does respond to the specifics around waste management, including vehicles, to pick up on your specifics. But the point I want to just make is a correction of the conversations that stem from last night. As we were clear in the scrutiny panel, when you look at the performance of this council, even with the tiny adjustments that were suggested to the target setting for realism, we are markedly ahead, and you kind of acknowledged it before, all other comparable authorities. We're still a leading performer. We also, at scrutiny, agreed, and I think across the panel, that significant stretch targets are going to require significant help and assistance from central government to enable them. And frankly, I think it's inevitable that will include step changes in vehicle procurement, which were going to be highly expensive for the foreseeable future. I did love, as always, Dennis, your rich remarks. Smog over Mile End, thank you. A thank you to Martin Goss, which is a very rare thing, but to be encouraged. And your offer of putting yourself up for a special mansion tax, but I think we should accept, if I'm frank. But in terms of actually how this sits, it sits in context of a high-performing council that actually does, to give you, if it is comfort for you, does take as seriously as you would want us from past conversations to in our response to the emergency that is climate change, within the scope of our capacity to do it. We're going to give a richer set of data to you and your colleagues on scrutiny, and we'll publish that to make sure it's understood both how well we're doing and how well we intend to do. I'll ask Martin to pick up your specifics later on. Thank you.
If I might reply to that, Leader. To me, a high-performing, environmentally friendly council recycles 70% of its refuse, and you can look around the county and find them. We are 53.
Can I just, this might be helpful. We'll send the letter on to you perhaps, but I've just had, and it's today, isn't it, from Kevin Bentley, a thank you letter to our officers and to the council for the quality of work that we're doing, both our way we address waste and its management, and the way in which we've been helping construct a new waste strategy for Essex. Those compliments are from the Conservative leader of Essex County Council, but I would accept them from anyone of any political party as it's based upon the quality of relationship and work. There is going to be this summer joint work. We're going to talk about it tomorrow at leaders of all the district authorities with the County Council. With the way ahead's collaborative, as you would expect, because you make a point, I do a set, which is what we do or don't do, and we do it much better than many, has an impact upon others. So if I can give you that kind of reassurance that some see us richer and better than perhaps you do, Dennis. Thank you.
David, I'm actually going to pick up on vehicles now because I think it's worth covering whilst it's fresh. So let me be really clear on electric vehicles. The technology for dust carts is not there. And I believe there's a case study where Brighton bought an entire fleet of electric HGVs and they have struggled to actually pick the waste up. The fleet has failed because they don't have either the speed or they don't have the capacity to handle the waste around Brighton. And that was a decision taken by the council, and it is a case study of failure, unfortunately. It is unfortunate, but that's the facts, and you can Google it yourself. We've had a vehicle on loan, and I believe we have a different vehicle from a different manufacturer. There aren't many manufacturers in the UK that have electric vehicles. And again, the vehicle that we had was slow, didn't have a very good speed, and could only stay close to the city centre, to the suburbs, because again of the distance that it can carry waste. So for the great distances that our fleet do actually move, and don't forget they also have to go and tip in Birch, where the composting occurs with a third party, the technology is simply not there. There's also, of course, a growing issue in the UK that, again, if you Google it, Dennis, and any other councillor or anyone else listening, there is an issue with the building of electric vehicles in this country because we do not have any battery manufacturing. And in fact, with EU law, national law, international law, and Brexit, whichever jigsaw you'd like to put all those together in, what it's culminated in is an issue that we will have problems manufacturing electric vehicles in this country because we do not manufacture any kind of battery. And as I understand it, I'm no expert in car manufacturing or vehicle manufacturing, but you have to produce a certain percentage in this country to allow it to occur. And I believe the only manufacturer that's going to be doing that is Jaguar, who have now confirmed they are going to be building their own battery plant to get around those issues. There are also supply issues of batteries in Europe as well, because there are not enough battery manufacturers. The only places where investment is going is the US and China. Those are the only areas, and they're not just around the corner. There is, of course, further complications around how you mine the iridium. There's allegations of child labour, of corruption in South Africa. Well, that's probably going a bit beyond the politics of Colchester City Council, but there are serious concerns about electric vehicles. And of course, we're in a cost of living crisis where energy costs have gone up by hundreds of %, particularly for councils, and particularly for businesses as well as residents. So actually the cost effectiveness of charging electric vehicles is now also questionable. So all of those challenges, not only for local authorities, but also people that buy electric vehicles, which are on average about £10,000 more than the combustion engine. So the whole electric vehicle argument and debate is currently under analysis for all of those reasons. So as much as I'd love to go out and buy some new electric vehicles, at this moment in time, for a multitude of reasons I've just given you a very quick sweep through on, the technology's not there, the manufacturing's not there, and therefore we have to look at alternates, which we do. And the HVO alternative is good from a fuel point of view, but also the cost pressures on that have increased as well. So at some points in the spot rate of the market, it's 60p a litre more than diesel. So again, people are looking at these new technologies, but if the supply of vegetable oil is not there and the manufacturing of it, then you've got an issue. So I just wanted to cover that because actually it deserves proper airing, and I wanted to cover that, but those are the facts and you can look them up.
Thank you, Martin. That's really helpful rounding off. We've got two more colleagues who want to speak on the garden waste charge, and then Martin will be back to you. So Councillor Naylor and then Councillor Hagan. Sorry, I guess you know the form. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me to speak as well. I wanted to talk to you about the rationale that underpins the decision you're making today. I've had a look through the papers, and one of the things that occurred to me as I was looking is we should all be doing first principles. What are our first principles? So all of us are residents, and all of us were elected among other residents to represent the residents. That's my first principle. So I'm really speaking to you here primarily as both a resident and a representative of Lexington and Braeswood Ward. The things people really assume are baked into what they will get from their council tax is a reliable, cost-inclusive refuse service. And I have to say, since I've lived here, I've been really pleased, in actual fact, with the refuse service. Okay, make a bit of a mess, you know, we could split hairs over that, but generally speaking, it's reliable. And people have an assumption that they will have their waste picked up. And part of that assumption is their garden waste, their green waste. So what I was pleased to see when I had a look through the papers is the section marked consultation. And I thought I would have a look actually at what that consultation involved. It says in 9.2 of the paper, 85% of respondents ranked environment either first or second out of 9 in order of importance in terms of budget spend, which really chimes with my first point. So, and then it goes on to say, at discussion groups, ideas were discussed that could potentially save money. Now, when I had a closer look at the data that sits behind these points, it really concerned me to find, in fact, the sample size was representative of less than, I think, around 0.5%, 0.6 of the entire population as it stands. And then the discussion groups themselves numbered 16 people out of the entire population of Colchester. Those 16 people were less, I think, I got the impression, than was hoped. And I would refer the committee to the principal recommendation from this report. So this is the council's own survey. And the summary at the beginning has some recommendations. And it says, talk and listen to residents more. So far, we've gone from 100 and, let's not split hairs, 1,100 people giving responses in a digital first survey, and I'm sure we could talk endlessly about digital exclusion and how some people won't know about this. And then of that, 16 people were, it suggests, consulted. But when I looked into the papers further, it has a note that says, the below boards garden waste and wheat bins were up in the room during discussion groups and individuals were able to vote, in inverted commas. So I actually don't know what that means, because voting is voting. I'm not quite sure what the inverted commas were for. Then it says there was no time to discuss in further detail. Now that really concerns me actually, because therefore the premise of acting on behalf of residents that we've been elected from boils down to 16 people in a room, and it says here, there was no time to discuss in further detail. That's the point I wanted to make. So if we return to that recommendation that came out of that major piece of consultation work that you began last September,
recommendation was talk and listen to residents more. And I just want to for the record, flag, it says here, residents feel they are not listened to, open brackets. There were many comments, especially in the survey, which I presume means people of their own free will and free text saying that this is what they believe, where respondents said they weren't going to leave a response because they, quote, wouldn't be listened to anyway, so what's the point? And I just want to return to something that some of my fellow councillors said. Councillor Scourders said the council was in effect going to throw this scheme in people's faces. Well, I do agree with Councillor Scourders based on what I've researched here. And Councillor Pearson said people would be a little bit miffed. I think Councillor Willits referred to dicey statistics. Well, I would suggest that these also are dicey. We are not consulting and representing the residents who voted for us if you proceed with this decision based on the evidence that you have in this paper here. That's my reading of it. There may be data behind this which elucidates further, but presumably those that commissioned this survey said to those who conducted it they were content with this summary and content on which councillors such as myself are expected to reflect and decide if this is a fair representation of consultation. And I have to conclude, Chair, that in my view it's not. This isn't a fair representation. And I know, as others have alluded to, that the calls that I've received, the comments I've received as I go about West Burgold and Lexton in my business and also as a councillor, people feel blindsided. They did not feel consulted. They are not aware of this. I actually don't want to get into the whys and wherefores of why you might be doing this or the legislation. My first principle is representation. What sits before you, I suggest to you, needs further consideration based on the fact that it seems to boil down to 16 people on a room and there wasn't time to talk about it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I mean, I think I'll just say one thing, and we've got one more speaker, because representation is councillors also. So the process by which we are elected to represent the views of our constituents, taking account of all the many things that people want rightly, what they think is important. Well, that's representation also. Consultation, from my perspective, is a reinforcement of awareness to help the local authority and to help members also judge what's important. 16 versus 1100, well, I know that there's significant efforts made and some of it well regarded and tested in the policy panel, which is cross-party. So, but now I hear what you say. It does depend on how you look at the numbers. As a local authority, we do have, I think, the right approach, which is to try to work across the aisle. That is helpful, I think, in terms of ensuring we do listen to different opinions across the whole of the city, rural and urban, and that can be a particular issue and things like this. And there is a way to go yet before the final detail is established. So thank you for your commentary. Appreciate it.
Chair, if I may just come back, may I ask what further reflections you will make on what I've spoken to the committee about in terms of the degree of consultation, in my view, which is inadequate?
Well, I'll take the point away, Sarah, and see for, Sarah, I beg your pardon. I usually get that right, as I should. And we will have a look at that particular set of data that you've referred to. I recognise one of those numbers, the higher one, not your 16. But as I say, the contextual piece is the one I've just described. So I can't do more now than say that we'll have a look at that. But in full council, after, it's not blindsided really, is it? We've been at this and heading in this direction for many months. And the reasons why have been known for many months. They've been well circulated. This has had, for those who do read the local press or listen to the radio, this has had a good airing. Your party and others have been quieter or not on this, but this has had a good airing in lots of fora, social media and otherwise, since last year. And it's uncomfortable for, I think, all of us, if we're honest about this, to do things that we know may not be attractive. But that's part of the responsibility of representing our constituents, which is, as I say, the higher duty to which I refer you. The informing of our judgment, that's helped by surveys. Thank you.
Sorry, point of correction, it's not my 16, it's actually the council's survey. So the number is in the document that supports this. So I'm referring to a number that's in the document. It's not my 16.
I was making reference to your reference, but I take the point, thank you. Right, we have one more. Councillor Jeremy Hagan.
Good evening, how are you? I'm just glad to move the rope to limbo is not good at my age. It's really, really bad. Thank you for the opportunity to come and have a chat with you guys about your garden waste tax proposal that's coming forward. As a representative and elected member of the Stanway ward, I'm here to speak on behalf of Stanway residents that have made their opinions very well known on our wonderful Stanway residents group, which I don't run. I just want that for the record because I know many times that's been asked. Councillor Goss, you are correct. We are in a cost of living crisis. It affects everyone, everywhere in one way or another. And some of these comments are important, and I hope that you do take it on board, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for listening. I'm going to read them in verbose. This is going to make fly tipping worse, and I'll be quick because I bet 20 of them. People already pay enough council tax. Double charging council taxpayers. This will be a burden on low-income households and the elderly. Our garden is a good size. We pay more council tax and then we get charged again. Not everyone has a car to take to the dump. We will end up with more fly tipping. We already pay council tax appropriate to our property/garden size, so those with bigger gardens are already paying more. If this is an opt-out scheme and most people don't pay for this service, the collection lorry will still have to travel the length of the road to collect from the few that do pay. My property does not have space for a wheelie bin. I know some authorities charge, but feel we pay quite enough as it is already. Do they think we just never have a never-ending amount of money? How difficult is it to wheel a full wheelie bin? I only have a small garden and use the green waste collection once in a blue moon with one bag. Would I end up being charged the same amount as a household that uses this service every week? I only have one full bag a month, not even that much most of the time. I would not be able to afford any increase. It will cost more to collect all the fly tipping from across the city. Residents of Stanway have spoken. They have provided a voice that these proposals to implement garden waste collection charges by this Lib Dem City Council administration are simply not wanted, unaffordable for many, and run the risk of increasing fly tipping across our city. It's simply not fair to charge our residents even more when they pay so much already. It's unclear if the government is proceeding with their proposal for a statutory free garden waste collection service, and if it does, it's likely to be introduced. If the government announces the national rollout of free garden waste collection services as per the proposals in their 2021 consultation, how will the City Council respond in those circumstances? Given challenges in the supply chains, how confident is this council that it'll be ready to roll the scheme out in January 2024 as planned? In the report, details of the charging regime have been given. At £10 set up, £30 for a wheelie bin, £55 annual subscription, residents could face an initial charge of £95, which is amongst the highest in the country. Will those with the correct wheelie bin still have to pay the £30 fee? Has this service been put out to tender? Many times we've heard this evening it's a commercial service. If it hasn't been put out to tender, why not? Perhaps there's a private operator that can offer a better value service to our residents. The decision this evening should be deferred until all the evidence can be looked at again and in greater detail. One other point I'll make the collections and storage costs haven't been explained for those that don't want to take up the service. I wonder if we could have some data on that as well, because there's a lot of wheelie bins out there that might need to be picked up, and I think it was already mentioned by one of my colleagues earlier. And I've got one more question for Councillor Goss, which can come back to me another time. Is Chesterwell still going to get their free garden waste bins? Thank you.
Well, I'll answer that now. No, because of course everybody will be going forwards as new customers.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I note your collation of the views of some of your residents. I have to say online I've seen quite a few grown-up comments too from people who do know that tendering, for example, Conservative run until recently, has provided a much weaker set of services, to be frank, with respect to them for their issues that they have to contend with, and that local authorities up and down the country are putting their money on the fact that the government is not going to help them until late. If it does come through and subsidised, that's what it would have to do across the country. Councils of many colours to provide a free service, that will be wonderful. We'll look forward to that moment. Until then, we have to do what has been accepted across the chamber, which is to balance the books. So my last thought on this, and I'll go to Martin, is the responsibility of a responsible opposition is to come forward with constructive alternatives. We haven't got those, so what we have to do is welcome, and we do, those things which make this a better service than the one that's now tabled, and to ensure that we then deliver that as well as we can. Thank you.
I just want to come back on one point, if you don't mind, Leader. Your comment about grown-ups' comments. These are our residents that you're speaking about. The comments have come from their heart, the way that they feel. So whether or not you've kind of misstrayed what's been said here, these are not childish comments. These are.
I didn't suggest they were. So
well, that's the way it came across. So thank you for clarifying.
Then let me correct how it may have come across. I would never do that. You, Jeremy, know, like I hope most do, that whatever my many flaws, lack of courtesy isn't one of them. So however that came across or misheard, never be rude to a resident. It's a first rule for all of us in this chamber and in this place.
Thank you for clarifying.
Martin, you've got a long list of mostly technical points, but I know is contextual for us as well. Would you like to respond to them?
So the first thing I am going to address is the Environment Act. So I've been in meetings with Essex County Council where the Essex Waste Strategy work has been going on with all portfolio holders across Essex. First point is that Essex has got an aspiration to deliver a recycling rate of 70% because most Essex councils don't deliver 70%. So Councillor Willett's referenced that there are, but actually, no, most are not. Mostly Conservative control, I'd also add. The other thing around the Environment Act was discussed at length at one of those strategy meetings. The government in an earlier set of white papers, yes, was considering asking for garden waste to be free. Now, during the consultation, because 65% of councils already charge for garden waste, and that's going to increase because of the cost of living crisis, many of the Tory controlled, I'll add, there was pushback during the consultation with councils to that early white paper. And the government, as I understand it, has now backpedaled to say, actually, we're going to leave garden waste charging alone because the amount of money it would cost to unpick in what's currently being charged by local authorities and the pushback on budgets, particularly in cost of living. So I'm afraid I think there's possibly some scaremongering there because as I understand it, the government is backpedaling on that. That is feedback that we've had through the Essex Waste Forum, that you've heard Councillor Bentley write and thank us all for the hard work. And in fact, I have another update meeting next Tuesday. So I just wanted to dispel those myths that have been put in here tonight or scaremongering that all of a sudden we're going to have to unpick it all. I think it's 99.9% very unlikely because 65% of councils charge and many have fed back to say, we can't support that because it will be a financial crisis. On to the report. So, as we know, in the report, the reason that we're having to do this is that £10 million of extra costs. Let me repeat that again, £10 million. Colchester historically has had an annual budget of £20 million. And also to dispel the myth that council tax pays for that £20 million, no it doesn't, because Colchester gets 11p in the pound. The rest of it goes to Essex, the gargantuan amount goes to Essex, including an extra tax on adult social care. That's a separate line now that government allows. Police, fire, and if you've got a community or parish council, you pay for that as well. So I would suggest people look at the council tax bills. Also by law, you cannot put council tax up normally above 3%, or you have to hold a referendum. So in Colchester's case, Band D property, put it up by 3%, that's £5 extra a year that the council would get. Doesn't even touch the sides on a £10 million set of extra costs in inflation, fuel costs, etc., staff costs. So I just wanted to outline that because people wanted us to be really crystal clear. Why are we having to look at this? Because this is not something I personally want to do. I've always been vocal against it, but I also have to live up to responsibility, because if councils don't deliver a budget, I've just mentioned Thurrock, potentially councillors can go to jail for bankrupting a council. That's ultimately what can happen. So we have a responsibility every budget in February to put up our hands and vote for a balanced budget. And you cannot deliver that just by putting 3% on council tax. It's as simple as that. And I've explained this in a very long response to a number of residents. And once they get those facts, because that's all I ever deal in, they understand. So we have to do a better job of getting those facts out there and actually stating why we're being forced to look at this. Because I think once you do that, and this is why I'm covering it before I've even touched the rice pudding and got the skin off this report, because it's so important to get that message across. And I could spend hours talking about this. So what we're saying is that we want to bring garden waste charges in regrettably from January 2024. And it is regrettable. And Sarah mentioned that we're residents. Yes. And I think what people also forget is we're also all council taxpayers. In many cases, we're also income taxpayers, etc., because many of us still work. We also will pay for this garden waste charge ourselves if we opt into the service, and I will be. And I will be one of those that have to pay £30 for a wheelie bin and a £10 registration fee, because I'm not on a wheelie bin route in Mile End, one of very few areas. So again, I'm just putting it into context that we're all affected by this decision. We don't get it free. We don't get free wheelie bins. We don't get discounts. We all pay because we are all taxpayers. I think, again, sometimes people forget that. So regrettably, we're having to bring this in. We will be making this as flexible as possible and as affordable as possible. And we've done a lot of work to look at what those other 65% of councils are doing. So yes, we've looked at what happens to fly tipping. Yes, we've looked at whether other councils offer a discount, or they offer a discount for those on benefits, or whether we spread the payment, or whether we do direct debit, or however we do it. We've looked at all those options. There is a lot of work that's gone into this, and what is in this paper is not necessarily the final product, because there's flexibility in this paper to allow for adjustments. This is a start, because you need a start to go out with, and in effect to consult on feedback, because we are hearing obviously comments on social media, etc. But there are 193,000 people in Colchester and growing, and there are small pockets of conversations going on Nextdoor and Facebook and other community sites, but there are not 193,000 people responding. It's pockets of people in different communities, and of course I read it and hear it and even do comment back on it, as you know I do, factually. So we are trying to make this as flexible as possible by learning from others, learning from other authorities, including all the Tory authorities that have charged for this for many, many years, and more Tory authorities that are looking at this. There are other councils in Essex, I understand, that are looking at this, not just us. And they're blue. So just bear that in mind. And there'll be other councils up and down the land looking at this. So that 65% figure will continue to increase. So we are looking to make it an opt-in service. We are allowing people to share with neighbours if they wish to have a bin. We're also allowing people to try and take on board some of the comments about storage of wheelie bins, smaller bins. So if you don't actually have that much garden waste, you can opt for a smaller wheelie bin. So you can choose the literage that will be easier to store, easier to wheel around, and therefore you can get your garden to fit the size of bin. Now, many authorities do not do that. We are trying to be flexible as well. We're also talking about composting, and I have looked up with what Councillor Pearson said on the Essex website, and it does clearly state it's a subsidised bin. So it is a subsidised compost bin because Essex are part of it, but you are right that you have to buy so many to get 50% off, but it is still cheaper than buying it from Amazon or some other ghastly retailer that's in it for profit. So we are also going to look at setting up community composting schemes, looking at working closer with the Allotments Association and using all those great networks that we've got out there. Of course, people will take it to the Household Waste Recycling Centre, and Essex have been fully consulted about our changes. So to say that we're just hoiking it onto Essex County Council, using the terminology, she didn't use the word hoiking, but that's in effect what she said. Councillor Lissamore is saying we're just passing it off to Essex. Well, no, we're not. We're working with Essex on a waste strategy with all other councils, and we're just doing what some other councils are doing, including tendering, whose recycling rates are still way below Colchester's. So we are working with Essex, so they are aware. They've introduced the very controversial, but actually I think it's worked quite well, the appointment system, and it is working. There's lots of appointments, and it is really controlling vehicle movements. Councillor Lissamore and I think Councillor Willits talked about vehicle movements. Well, actually, they're controlling it much better now, and we don't have massive great queues up at Shrub End, which actually inhibits our own vehicles getting in and out. And there are other ways that you could go to a private garden waste licensed waste carrier if you so wished. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can. In terms of fly tipping at this moment in time is around 20% down year on year, and we have done a lot of work to drive that down. And with Wise, the company that we're currently using, we will be doing a lot more work on fly tipping investigations. So we've already invested in the relationship with Wise, and the services they deliver are being widened bit by bit with the skills that they have, at no cost to this council, I will add. So we've already considered fly tipping anyway as a whole across Colchester, and obviously that thinking and strategy is clear for all to see. So I'm not going to go through every part of the paper because clearly everyone has read it, given the amount of comments that we've had back. One of the comments that's come up, and I've had discussions on it because I have a very polarised view on it, others have a very different polarised view on it. There are around 12,750 houses in Colchester that have wheelie bins. And for me to look residents in the eye and say, you know, that nice brown wheelie bin that we gave you in 2017 that's now a bit smelly and maybe a bit dented but still very usable, I'm not sure that we can then charge them for a wheelie bin they've had for that length of time. That's my personal take on it, because we got funding for those bins. That was funded through government funding. And if other wards decided not to have wheelie bins, Prettygate, Highwoods, whatever, those ward councillors are the ones that made those decisions, because again, being Colchester, we've been super flexible. And actually, I think that's cost us, personally, years later, because now what we have is a hybrid waste system that is expensive, that is difficult to manage, and that's why we're undertaking a waste review at this moment in time that will deliver some outcomes and recommendations in the summer once that work is done via the Environment Panel. This is obviously a sister piece of work, or a brother piece of work, alongside that to complement that, and wheelie bins was found to be the most effective way to deliver that for everybody. 83% of councils and growing have some form of wheelie bin in this country. Now, some have 3 because they have their recycling in it as well. We've chosen 2 because, again, we've tried to reduce the burden on storage on residents. And yes, I take it on board that not every property is going to be perfect, but we also do offer the service where people can have help. They get it now, they'll get it in the future. So if a resident is struggling with their garden waste sacks or their waste sacks now, that same service will be available to help wheel a wheelie bin from an agreed location and put it back in that location, because we believe in helping those that most need it, and we will do that at no charge. So that is the situation to cover that. In terms of charging for a bin, well, we have to charge for a bin, because the whole point is if we're having to outlay 30 quid on a bin, that completely undermines the business case, because we have got, we're not going to make a profit on the bins, we're simply charging what we're going to be charged, and that's a fact. But once they've paid for the wheelie bin once, that is the end of that capital cost. The annual cost will then be £55 or whatever we set it at. That's the suggestion in the paper, and it's very middle in terms of charging. It's not one of the most expensive in the country. It's very middle and very comparable to other Essex authorities, because we've done lots of benchmarking. The officers have worked for months and months and months on this, taken feedback, taken soundings, done lots of research, including, looking at increases in bonfires. Now, from looking at other authorities, there hasn't been a huge increase in fly tipping, and there hasn't been a huge increase in bonfires and complaints. So again, and the other thing that I've picked up on social media, and actually nobody's mentioned it, is suddenly we're going to have a huge crime epidemic in Colchester where all the wheelie bins are going to get stolen. And again, I've reaffirmed that to people, that there is no case studies I could find or any feedback I've had that other authorities have had bandits running around nicking wheelie bins and flogging them on the black market. It simply isn't happening. So I just want to reassure people of that. But that's, again, kind of one of those things that's come up. It's a myth. It's not fact. The fact is, no, it's not happening. We lose the odd wheelie bin now because the odd neighbour wheels it into their drive mistakenly, etc., or maybe does it as a wind up to their neighbour, but we're not going to have an epidemic of people stealing wheelie bins and flogging them. I just wanted to put that to bed. In terms of garden waste sacks, no, we can't keep running a hybrid service. It's too expensive. And the one thing that I'm slightly disappointed hasn't come out, and I'm really going to make this point, is that the level of sickness amongst our staff, it's not, Councillor Lissamore, the fact that our staff like wheelie bins, it's actually because they have to shift tons and tons of waste in Hessian sacks, which, by the way, are not environmentally friendly. So we've talked tonight about climate emergency, but we're buying tens of thousands of Hessian sacks that are ghastly. You can't recycle them, and they go missing a lot of the time on windy days, so there's a huge cost to those. At least with a plastic recycling bin, it's made of recycled plastic and it isn't going to go anywhere. So Hessian sacks, no, I'm afraid we've got to get rid of them. They are terrible for our staff. They walk 20 miles a day, and the muscle injuries they suffer a much higher percentage of sickness on those routes, including with black sack, of course, as well, because they're shifting tons of rubbish. But garden waste can be extremely heavy, especially if you've got 4 sacks out from every household in the summer months, spring and summer months. So actually it's a staff welfare issue. So let's be really clear on this. There's a huge cost of living issue, £10 million to find. And then there's also staff welfare, because actually without the staff, you can't collect waste. And they're not highly paid jobs. They're not jobs everybody will want to do. So we really appreciate our staff, and we're listening to our staff because they've been raising this for some time. So we are going to do something about it. In terms of how the scheme will work, you will get stickers, you will put them on your bin, and it will also be registered on the in-cab technology, so that we can't have fraud where people are getting a free garden waste collection service where they just put the bin out, because again, that's been on social media. So again, we're following what other authorities do. We're learning from other authorities. We haven't dreamt all this up. I haven't come up with the idea of putting stickers on bins. This is what other authorities do to ensure that they are flagged, and we don't just rely on the technology should there be a blip or anything, or people trying to do it from memory. So we've really thought this through operationally. 5.2.3 is really clear. We are going to be doing marketing. We are going to be offering 14 and a half months for the price of 12. It's really clear. It says, well, we might do some promotions. No, let me be clear. We are doing promotions. It's really crystal clear in the paper, and we will continue to market that and do half price offers, etc. It's in the paper. It's really clear. So, I don't know where the idea is we might do some offers. We are, because that's part of the marketing of a product, as Councillor Scordis put it. In terms of vehicles, I'm not going to go over the vehicles again. I covered it earlier, and I covered the challenges we have. If I could buy a fleet of vehicles tomorrow that were electric, I'd do it. But I've outlined those challenges, so I don't need to go over those again. And I've also talked about HVO as well. So in terms of this, I think I've covered the salient points. I think we've had a huge discussion, and I think, to be fair, I've covered off pretty much most of the questions because they were all fairly generic, and the biggest one was around 30 quid and the biggest one was around charging people for a bin they've already got. Now, I'm not saying that this is the final paper, because this will go through scrutiny and we will take on board other people's views, but I also would then put the challenge back. How can you sell a charge of 30 quid to somebody that's had a 6 or 7 year old bin that you had government funding for? It's double accounting, in my opinion. And if people say we're paying tax, well, then taxpayers have paid for that government funding to fund the original bins that many ward councillors turned down, I will add. If they hadn't turned them down, you'd have wheelie bins, therefore you'd have less of an issue. So I think that covers the paper in depthly. I think I've covered off most of the questions as well, but happy to take any other points.
Thank you. I saw two other members. I'm conscious we spend a long time on this. That's right that we do. We'll be back to this during the next few months as well. So I saw Councillor Smith and then Councillor Luxford-Vaughan.
Thank you, Leader. This is not something that any of us want to do. We have to do it because the financial position that the council finds itself in. A £3.5 million deficit on the annual budget at the moment requires action. And if there are some who don't think that requires action, well, Councillor, you mentioned Thurrock, but today we heard that Woking has effectively declared bankruptcy as a council because of the mismanagement of the Conservative council there, leaving them with debts of £1.2 billion. And just so I'm not biased on this, I'll also mention Croydon, which was run by Labour, which got itself into similar situations. But this shows the problems that councils up and down this country are having if they do not get a proper grip on their finances. And that is something that this administration, with the support of the Labour group and the Green Party in Colchester, are very clear on. We accept the financial responsibilities that we've got, and we have to take the tough decisions that we don't like doing to try and rectify them. So we need to look at how we're going to do it, because there is a choice, Councillor Lissimore. You could take the approach that Essex County Council has, where they have managed decline of the roads. They'll only spend half what's needed on repairing the potholes because they don't have to spend the money. That's one way of dealing with it. Or you can do what we're doing and looking for extra income to fund it to protect frontline services. And that again is something which we, the Labour group and the Green Party in Colchester, are committed to doing. Now, I was very interested with what Councillor Willett said. He couldn't think of our achievements over the past 10 years. Oh, Councillor Willett, you really shouldn't give me an opportunity like this. Let me give you a few examples of other things. Building the first council houses in the borough or in the city in a generation. Achieving record CO2 reductions way ahead of the time of many other councils. Our support for refugees. Gaining city status. Being a living wage council, the first in Essex, and having a growing economy. Oh, and there's one other down here as well. Being in the top 3 councils for improving recycling rates. That was a year when we brought in some reforms. Reforms which, as I recall, Councillor Lissimore, Councillor Willett, you opposed tooth and nail. but it worked. We got the result that's going. So I have to say, this is something which I think we have to do now. Yes, I would have much preferred to have paid for it out of general taxation, but as has been explained, we can't do that. And what we therefore need to do is to look at the options that we've got. Now, I very much take on board what's been said tonight and the suggestions that other councillors have put forward as to way the schemes could be modified. And I would really like scrutiny to go away and have a good look at those schemes and some of those suggestions and the charging structures and what have you within the financial envelope that we've got. Because simply saying it's too difficult, we're not going to do it, is just not an answer in these economic circumstances that we find ourselves in and that the country finds itself in due to the mismanagement of central government. Because let's not forget, one of the big burdens we've got is the increase of borrowing. And why have we got increased costs of borrowing? Because the interest rates went up when the Conservative government grossly mismanaged the economy with its disastrous mini budget and destroyed its international reputation for sound, prudent finance. Sound, prudent finance. That's what this administration stands for.
Thank you, Paul. I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to have two brief finishes.
I promise
Andrea?
to keep it brief,
Michelle,
which is
thank
my style. Just to make it clear, I hate this. My residents hate it. I think it would be very, very unusual to find anybody in the entire city who would go, yeah, great, let's just pay out another 80 quid a year. I think I was convinced that it was the right thing to do when Councillor Goss explained with a gun to my head, it's this or you lose Leisure World. It's this or we close the parks when they run down. You know, it's not a nice position to be in, not one that I'm enjoying in any way whatsoever. I have total empathy for all of those councillors that come tonight and say every single comment on Facebook is negative. Of course it's going to be. It's a horrible thing to have to do. But I think, you know, what we do need to remember is we are all individuals, we are all residents as well. We have the choice. I personally will not pay the money. I think it's bad value for money. I'm going to compost. I think, you know, in our press, we need to look at those alternative ways of to deal with this option. I'm also encouraged by Councillor Goss saying the parity between buying the bin and having one given to you by the borough will be resolved at a later date and won't be part of his delegated personal decision, because that is a serious issue which I think a lot of people have discussed tonight, and it does need some options that we can all look at and see what is the most revolting.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. I think something that's really important to remember amongst all this is that the people who collect our rubbish are also residents of Colchester. And one of the areas within the new strategy talks about improving health, well-being and happiness of residents. I recently spoke to some bin collectors, and one of whom had recently had 2 weeks off due to tendinitis because of the huge weights that he has to carry and lift and clear. And so it's really clear, I think, that change is needed to ensure that our bin collectors, who are residents of Colchester, do have access to improvements in their health, well-being and happiness.
Thank you, that's very well said. I could close this item now. I know that some of you are waiting to come on to items further in the agenda, but I'm going to give us all a 10-minute break. That's an excellent discussion. Can I thank visiting councillors who are still here? I genuinely appreciate all the contributions, noted them. I think we have. Thank you very much, Martin. No, I get. Thank you. I think we've responded in the way that we should, and comprehensively with the context you described. If there's any points of detail, such as the encouragement for return of the bins, I thought that was an interesting idea. We'll pick up all of that and the equity point. So thank you for the reminder too that we'll come to a decision. It'll be good, wouldn't it? So it's, I suggest, Martin, if you're content, that we just refer colleagues to the recommended decision set out in paragraph 2. Are you content? Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for all the contributions. 10-minute break, please. Ready when you are. Okay. Thank you very much and welcome back to the second half of this enjoyable evening in the Town Hall. It's been a great conversation before. Now we're on to item 8, which under the housing portfolio, acquisition of 7 new build homes. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. This is a opportunity for us to increase the amount of social housing provided on a site in Colchester by 40%. More importantly, it's the right sort of social housing, 3 and 4 bedroomed properties. The sorts of properties that will help not just the family that moves in, but the family that moves in will probably move out of a 2-bedroom property, enabling someone to move into that. Someone from a 2-bedroom property going free, a 1-bedroom property. We could be helping somewhere in the region of 20 plus families in Colchester get into better quality accommodation. So it is a deal which I fully recommend to you. We do, as you all know, have a serious housing problem in Colchester, with the number of people in homeless accommodation and also in bread and breakfast accommodation. This is part of our response to deal with it. And it's the opportunity also by getting in on the ground floor to ensure that properties are fully compliant with CBH's requirements. So things like the heating systems and what have you will be fitted to their standard. There'll be high energy efficiency Band B properties, so good for the environment, good for the people living in them, and all round a very good deal. I commend it to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. This is my error as chair. Councillor Rippingell was going to speak. Please do. And Paul, perhaps you could then respond to that and then wrap up on any other comments from colleagues. Thank you.
It's all right. I just thought you'd forgotten about me. So I sit here as one of the directors of CBH and the shadow portfolio holder for housing. I welcome any new housing that can be added to our portfolio that are future-proofed, move people out of our overcrowded situations, alongside reducing the amount of households in temporary accommodation. However, I do have 2 points I'd like to make regarding these acquisitions. We always say you require us to be critical friends, so I'm going to put these points to you. Given that many of the new build sites are now leasehold rather than freehold, can the portfolio holder for housing please confirm that these acquisitions will be of a freehold nature rather than a leasehold nature? The reason being, we don't want to put ourselves or tenants at risk of ever increasing ground rent charges that other leaseholders have been subjected to, given we are focused on keeping costs under control in our council budgets. Secondly, I would like to understand whether there are any plans to review the current acquisition programme. As a member of CBH board, we discussed this actually last month about the cost of retrofitting houses that we are acquiring. This is now looking at the region of 30 to 40,000 on top of the purchase price to bring them up to the standard that we would require as CBH properties to be. The scheme provides much needed housing at a time when we're beginning to see the need increase. But given the cost to retrofit these houses to our standards, I would ask the portfolio holder reviews the current strategy for purchasing houses to whether land acquisition would be a more appropriate strategy. There have been excellent examples of where we have built our own council homes, with residents in Newtown in particular having benefited from the Future Home 25 standards homes that were placed on Military Road. We have excellent resources in-house, particularly at CBH, to deliver these new homes that meet the needs of our residents. I look forward to working collaboratively with the portfolio holder in my role of CBH to improve our council housing stock and improve the standard of living for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor. May I congratulate you as a councillor for Newtown and Christchurch for getting a plug in for a development which I believe is in Newtown and Christchurch. So congratulations on that. Definitely these properties are freehold. I fully share your concerns about leasehold properties, and certainly we also need to bear very much in mind the full costs of acquisitions, including bringing them up to the required standard when we purchase them. Obviously, it's always a difficult balance, and when we have funds that, if we don't spend from, say, council house receipts, that we have to give back to the central government, which unfortunately the representatives of seem to have left the meeting at this point, which is sad. I try very hard not to give any money back to the government, but we will certainly bear that in mind. Thank you.
I'd be really keen for us to aggressively look at vacant sites that have been left by developers. So when the previous portfolio holder was in charge, we listed a number of sites, particularly in Newtown and Christchurch, but obviously open to other areas where developers have no longer got the viability to develop those sites because it's not affordable for them to do that. And I would like for us to consider that as an option to bring affordable housing into our stock as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Yes, we are certainly always open to opportunities, and I too have been putting forward some suggestions for some sites that can be looked at on that basis.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing else from colleagues, then Paul, would you like to remind us of the decision?
I recommend that you agree the decision set out in the report to agree the spending of the money for that. It is, of course, strange for me as an ex-resources portfolio to actually ask for money to be spent, but in this case, it's in a very good cause.
It is indeed, and despite that welcome discomfort, I commend the colleagues that we so agree. Thank you very much. That's passed. Section 9, strategy. I know that the monitoring officer are particularly excited about the first item, which is the new scheme of delegation to officers. That's what he did tell me earlier. This is important, and it completes the rounded understanding of where authority lies. It sits alongside financial instructions and authorities as well. And it's a helpful document for new councillors and for those who want to look at the authority and understand actually who is responsible for what. But I don't intend to labour it. It is as set out in the paper. Unless there's any questions from colleagues, then I move, as described in paragraph 2, that we approve the new scheme of delegation and for it to come into immediate effect and to delegate to the monitoring officer as necessary that capacity with myself for you to make such changes as necessary. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Similarly, what does catch your attention a little bit more is the appointments to external organisations and council groups. I look at Councillor Goss, who particularly enjoys this, because he, with I, has that challenge with our partner group leaders of ensuring that we have representatives of this local authority spread, sometimes it has to be said a little thinly, but wherever we think we should. Back to the earlier conversation, we do so in a way that is as far as we can cross-party and alive to the interests and the skills of relevant members. So Martin, is there anything you'd like to say on this?
Yeah, there is one change I think we need to make to LHP, where Councillor Hogg had requested to come off LHP, and I think Councillor Summers was going to go on it. So that was just one change that has come up that we may need to address, but the best way of addressing that I'll take advice on, but that's a change that we do need to make.
Andrew, we can confirm the change here, can we? Or
Sorry, Chair, can we just clarify, are we talking about the local highways panel? Councillor Hogg's name isn't on it.
No, it's all right. I think he's got confused because he's received the papers. So he's written to me tonight to say, why have I got the papers? That's why I thought I'd best raise it. So he'd said if he was coming off, Natalie had offered to jump in, but if he's not down, then that's absolutely fine.
Vaughan is out.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so that's a clarification. Right, thank you, Martin, and I'll ask you to pass that back if you wouldn't mind. So on that basis, as presented, I asked colleagues to so agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. Which gets to item 10. And for the excellent, much esteemed Sam Good, who I know has shown real strength of mind and soul. Stand ready, Sam. Not yet. I've got Councillor Chris Pearson and Councillor Broomfield first. If the two of you would come forward. Oh, it's just yourself, Molly. Right, okay, Molly, please, thank you. Thanks, Molly.
In the current cost of living crisis, charities are picking up the slack from the Tory government even more. Charities in the city centre are providing food for families, adults who are struggling to make ends meet, and for senior citizens who have been affected the most by the energy crisis. Charities support those with physical and mental health needs with clothing, furniture, and many other staples. So I would just ask the Cabinet why charities are being asked to pay more for the bid at this time, as it is my worry that it will dent their ability to provide these essential services.
Thank you very much, Molly. I have talked to Sam Good about this before, and he'll address what I think could be made clearer, and he'll do that when he comes to speak in turn. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Leader and Cabinet again. And I welcome much of what's in this paper, certainly about strategic pillars for a memorable city, forward-thinking city, a safe and welcoming city, a connected city. I think we will all subscribe to those values and those aspirations that are contained in the paper. But as Molly's just suggested, I think there's one little bit that we're slightly anxious about, and that is in 7.2, where it's proposed that the bid levy payable on non-domestic properties be raised from 1.5% to 1.75% for the private sector non-domestic rate levy. That amounts to an increase in my rough and ready calculations of 17% in round figures. Yet we're suggesting that the additional levy for the charitable sector should go up from 1.2 to 1.5%, which is a quarter, a 25% rise. And that seems a little unfair and inappropriate in the current circumstances. So when you look at your recommendations, makes sense, recommendation 2.1, 2.2 and 2.4, but the bid levy in line with the charges set out in 8.2, I would just respectfully request that bid and Cabinet just review again. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Sam, please.
So if it's okay, I'll read my statement and then cover them bits at the end, if that's okay. So as manager of the Agricultural Business Improvement District, I've had the pleasure to work with most in the room today, and I'd like to place on record our thanks to the current Cabinet and multiple cabinets that we've worked with over the last 5 years. Alongside this, we've had the pleasure to work with officers of the City and County Council alike with an open door approach for business conversations at all times. A core focus of our work over the last 5 years has been to strengthen the partnership working in the city centre with businesses, local authorities and stakeholders for the greater good of Colchester. As a critical friend, it is essential that the bid is able to have frank and honest conversations when it comes to key topics to ensure that our businesses' voices are heard and at the forefront of decisions. I would like to thank previous leaders, Councillor Corey, Councillor Dundas and current leader, Councillor King, for supporting that to happen since day one, and for continuing to strengthen our relationship alongside this. Since being voted in by the businesses of Colchester City Centre in 2018, the bid has supported the new city centre through potentially the toughest time for businesses in generations. From a nationwide lockdown due to the pandemic in March 2020, cost of living crisis, energy crisis, and everything in between, the bid has taken every opportunity to step up and provide where needed, carefully listening to the specific needs of our businesses and other organisations within the city centre. The bid has enabled an investment of over £2.5 million into the city centre through the bid levy, accompanied by an additional income through external funding of £865,000. In additional funding and supporting other strategies and visions such as the Towns Deal and Levelling Up Fund, which we're working through, and enabling projects such as the curbless streets and shop front improvement grants, which are underway as we speak. As we edge towards the post-pandemic world, the bid is continuing to lead as a core business representative in the city through its formation of the Leisure Recovery Board, formation and chairing of the very first City Place Marketing Board following Colchester's successful bid for city status, and representing Colchester on a national scale through presenting as guest speakers at large conferences across the country. So as we move towards the new and exciting 5-year term, the bid has adopted its new direction, and I thank you all for taking the time to read what can sometimes be a lengthy book, which I have bought actual copies today if you'd like to take away as well. So I hope that you had the opportunity to read through those, what we believe to be an ambitious and bold vision for Colchester City Centre over the next 5 years. And as one of the UK's newest cities, it is essential that we must deliver a memorable experience for visitors and residents in a place that is safe and welcoming for all. Through a connected business network, we will continue to be the voice for Colchester City Centre businesses and drive a forward-thinking approach for our continued development of visions and strategies. Further on to Councillor's comments on the charity, and thank you for forward notice of that. We, of course, have taken considerable consultation through the development of the business plan and rules that we have to adhere to in line with the bid regulations. And as most of you will know, probably all know, in April 2023, there was a nationwide revaluation of business rates, which happens every 5 years, will now happen in 3 years' time. Through that re-evaluation, which is fantastic, by the way, it's great for us and something we've been lobbying for a long time, we saw a 66% reduction in rateable values across Colchester City Centre, which is, again, fantastic because that means a reduction in rates. 20 of our top 25 levy payers reduced, and the new term, the 2023 to 2028 term, which we're proposing, is actually taking less money over the next 5 years than we've taken in the previous 5 years. So I'd like to stress that although, and I will go into the reasons for the percentage in a minute, the changes that we've made in the rules will actually see most of our levy payers, certainly the majority, paying less or paying the same as they've paid over the last 5 years. Because of the reduction in RV, the slight increase in levy percentage outweighs that. So on the charity topic, our average reduction on RV is 3% across levy paying businesses. So despite the increase on the slight increase on charities, and just for a slight correction, on the increase on the levy rate, we actually charge a 2% inflation per annum. So although we started year one at 1.25% for charities and shopping centres to 1.5% for headline, with the 2% inflation, we actually ended this year on 1.29 and 1.59. So again, although there is a change, we have to make sure that we're taking that into consideration as well. It is also worth noting that charities do also receive fantastic benefits through the 80% reduction in business rates, and sometimes for most charities in Colchester, 100% business rates reduction. And with most of our charity levy payers actually paying zero rates and actually zero levy because of them being under the threshold of 15,000, which you have to pay for the levy. So, but I think it's a massively important topic. We support a lot of charities within the city centre through our Create Fund, with over £75,000 invested through that over the 5 years, and we've actually just released and launched a Colchester Community Fund, which has already funded 3 fantastic charities in the city centre in the last week as well. So although we are charging a levy, the desirable would be to charge no one levy and continue to improve, but everything is weighed up and through consultation as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. I'll start this off as if there's any other colleagues want to ask any questions of you. I hope, looking to my left, that that's helpful because I translate this. I think there is a point to take away, Sam, which I'd like to use as an action, if you would, of clarification, which is a short summary of how the equation works. Because as I understand it from our brief conversation before, the effect is that people were not in a charitable, again, they do vary, but they're not going to be paying more. They might be paying the same, they might be paying less. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think a little bit of detail that might help colleagues. And if that's the case, then I'll just park that off, Chris, to one side just for the moment. I think that what you've said on the support to charities in the city centre is something that's not widely understood. So I think there's a positive story here, which is very much in the ethics that I know do drive you as an organisation and do drive this city council, which is why one of the reasons why there's such a strong partnership is we see life around us in the city centre and the way the city should be run in terms of its service and its ideals, that balance between ideal and delivery and vision, much the same way. So I think there is a comms piece that would help explain that equation between rateable value and the reality of what you have to pay, which is at the end of the day what people will care about most, or how it might look. If you'll please excuse that, it's a very mild critique set against a brilliant story. You know, you've changed as a group. Well, that's a conversation we've had at the bid board, and there's been a natural learning process which some of my colleagues like Mark have seen perhaps more than others. I think you're doing a fabulous job, frankly. You're great partners. There's some great relationships there, and it's that combination how we work together that is the best prospect for this city centre. We're talking even now, aren't we, about how we might get more help from county, how you might help us, help them, and help the city council to present a yet better view of the cities. That's that combination, speaking up for the best. That's the bravery we want from you sometimes. You have to get a very wide audience, but that bravery and that delivery are really promising. I'm personally a fan of both the bid, what you've done, and what's proposed here. I'll stop there, go around the table to colleagues, I'll go to Martin and then Mark.
I think we would be, as a city, foolish to throw away the bid. I think you've proved yourself in the last 5 years. I think the work you've done, we've done some work together. You've challenged me on parking charges. You may be challenging me again shortly on something else, but I think it works really, really well. And only today on Facebook, on social media, that drives me mad. Somebody's having a go at the council saying, you need to do more to encourage more this retailer and that retailer. And I then go back and say, it's not the council. We don't own the property, but we have the bid. The bid leads on all those conversations, and they are doing masses to try and fill shop units and get those brands here. And it's great that we can point them at you as an independent set of businesses that lead that for us, rather than everything being up to the council to do, which it's not. But it's really good that you're there to do it, so thank you.
I didn't realise Martin was going to speak, so it's some of what I was going to say, and David said it well as well. So first of all, thank you for coming tonight, Sam, and waiting through part of our agenda and lots of it on garden waste. You've explained it really well, and actually Richard was timing you to begin with, but you're here as an expert, so it's not actually sort of worth stopping you. It's good to hear your full explanation, and I think you have explained away in a way that we could all understand how the increases actually are not going to be seen in the way that you could think about it on the paper itself. You are actually seeing reduction for many. And I think, as Martin and David have said, you've managed the bid really well, so thank you for that. You explained during COVID, without the bid, I think we would have seen much less support for businesses, much less collective action. And it's so important when businesses see, yes, it is a levy, let's be honest, taxes and levies, not everyone likes to contribute in that way, but actually the sum of the parts coming together makes it so much better for Colchester and the surrounding areas that we have you supporting businesses and encouraging business, and like Martin said, attracting a new business and supporting those to survive. Relations with business have improved from when, as you say, when it's created, when I was leader and understanding the work, and David did that work as well alongside you as you were growing. So I think it's fantastic. And what we mustn't forget, these are small and medium-sized businesses, these are local businesses, and they contribute to our local economy by employing workers, giving them a decent wage, and that's what it's all about. So I think I commend this, I commend the work you're doing. There will always be criticism between us and yourselves. We need to work together and improve as best as possible the offer for shoppers, for residents, for workers and for businesses. So we'll keep working together with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No comments.
Well, then, colleagues, we have in front of us a rich paper representing the work of the bid and the proposals for renewal and the ballot, which have to be run by the local authority by the monitoring officer. As set out in paragraph 2, I ask you to confirm that we're satisfied that the renewal proposal for 23-28 proceeds, to agree to the ballot, to agree to collect the bid levy, and to instruct the Chief Operating Officer to vote yes in the renewal ballot on behalf of the Council in respect to its non-domestic rate paying properties located within the bid area. There is a cost to us too. I'm sure Sam is bearing that in mind when we next come to him for help and support in one of the projects which we know is good to do but don't have the pennies for. So are we content?
Yes, agreed.
Thank you very much. And Sam, personally, can I just say to you and to your bid, please pass back to the board the appreciation of the Cabinet for what you do, and please accept a slice of that for yourself. You've done a fantastic job, Sam. You can be proud of yourself. Thank you. Right, corporate key performance indicator targets. Alison, I know you enjoyed last night immensely.
I did, yes.
Would you like to kick us off?
So we're looking at setting our corporate key performance indicator targets. Some of you will know that last night we had a fairly robust but constructive discussion about the KPIs as set out. I have reflected on it. I do think I did initially agree that pulling some of them backwards doesn't seem the right thing to be doing, but actually I think we need to be realistic. There's no point in setting a high target we're not going to achieve. We might as well set a realistic one, and I think we've got to understand the reasons why some of them are lower, and that particularly with review to like the waste strategy, that will improve. It's going to take more than just setting a very tiny change in target. It's a big behaviour change to get up to the 70% or that we're looking for by 2035. So I think I'm quite comfortable we can go ahead with those. Some of the ones where people were asking for more detail, I think we can come back when we bring the key performance reports, and we will take account of that conversation, and that what we will do is add some more explanation. I'm very keen on adding some columns on comparative performance and performance to benchmarking so that we know where we are in a similar market. As I explained last night, that doesn't always work, but I think we need to be comfortable with where we are. As I was pointing out again on the waste yesterday, we might not want to pull it backwards, but actually we're performing better than a lot of others, so we need to take some comfort from that. So really it's just a question of adding more explanation and some benchmarking as an extra, but I recommend that we adopt those KPIs as set out.
Mark.
Thank you, Alison, and I heard reports of you doing a good job yesterday explaining and listening, which is important when we're setting new targets as well. I just wanted to identify the absolutely new KPIs and targets that we're putting in place on the environment, which it really supports the commitments we made back in 2019 now towards the climate emergency and biodiversity problems. And the three in particular that I think are really helpful are, we're now looking at the trees planted, and that will also involve measuring the quality and evaluation of our tree planting, improving biodiversity, which is absolutely key, and achieving our pathway to net zero and the targets that we've set for 2030. So that really shows our commitment to the environmental aspects, that we're measuring ourselves down to the detail, and that we are going to continuously report on how we are doing on that pathway towards net zero. So I know that will be a challenge, and Alison, you'll keep on top of that, but all of us have to contribute to these indicators, and especially the environmental ones. That's the biggest challenge for us.
Thank you. A couple of remarks, just this touched on last night at scrutiny, was the context for us, which is that the Local Government Association's review not only gave us some good marks, but asked us to look more robustly than we have as a council before, at the strategic plan, it's linkage to delivery and then the indicators. So that's why there's so many new indicators here. 15 out of the 25, I think, are new. So accepting that some refinement of them is going to prove necessary to ensure that they are appropriate. That's the spirit in which we're agreeing tonight, if we do, to the start point of KPIs. And we should welcome contributions, and we had some good ones last night. They are a strong foundation for measurement of how we do in the way that Alison has described. So Alison, do you want to move them?
Sorry, I move that we accept the corporate KPIs as set out.
Agreed. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon?
You have two recommendations from scrutiny last night
Yeah, okay.
that you need to take into account before you make your decision, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my apologies. I wasn't sure whether I needed to raise these, but obviously there is a recommendation noting the council's policy of continuous improvement in its services. The council's performance targets should be set by Cabinet as to take performance in an upward direction, unless there are exceptional circumstances to justify diverging from this approach. I agree. I think we need to take that recommendation on board, but subject to, as I was saying earlier, about being realistic, and that the proposed range of performance targets be adopted as being a reasonable way of measuring progress on the council's new strategic plan, as the leaders just said.
Yeah, thank you. So to be clear, this conversation is entirely consistent with the scrutiny discussion last night, which sees us as refining it, but it supports the approach which links indicators to the new strategic plan. Thank you very much indeed. So as moved, thank you. Agreed. Thank you very much. Councillor Dave Harris, I think, wants to come in on item 10.3, which is Councillor Personal Development Plan, and try to do it the right way around. Dave, if you're there, if you've got something to say before we start.
I certainly have, Leader. Thank you very much for calling me in. I felt duty bound to come in and salute the work of Matthew Evans, the Democratic Services team, Richard Clifford, etc., for the work and the training and that is provided over that last 12 months. This annual report to you, 190,000 odd residents have 51 us councillors looking after them. They deserve the best councillors that we can be, and I believe we do that. You've only got to look at the numbers of training places that have been taken up through the year. Even the chief executive briefings were well attended, and all of that I salute. For me, though, it's duty bound, the older ones of us, and I class myself in that. I've been on a few years now, not as much years as some of the others of our colleagues, Leader, as you know, have done many more years than I have. But we do the best we can to actually coach others, to work with others, and to represent our residents in the best way we can. And this personal development plan you've got in front of you, Leader, is I think, to be saluted. Adam Fox, ex-councillor Adam Fox, was an advocate of it, and he led this committee through this year. Robert Davidson was on there, myself and Richard Kirby-Tabor, and we all felt the same way that a PDP is a format. And I would encourage all leaders of all the parties, whoever they are, to actually play ball with this and do exactly what this report says, to take it forward and develop a plan. I learn every day of my life. Whatever work that I'm doing, I always carry on learning through all your life. And I know you're the same, and the rest of the councillors bring the same. So we have to take this on board. And I want to say, keep doing what you're doing for the member development. I hope that the level of training will carry on in the format and the way that it's done. I'd also ask for Essex County Council laws that do training elsewhere in another place a few miles up the road, for the credit to be given for the training that they do as well, because that's important, because quite often they'll get training there that we don't always recognise, do we, Leader? So I think if that can be done, but I will certainly be setting an example, and I hope you will as well, in filling my PDP and submitting it to my group leader through Democratic Services and following this process. So keep doing the training we're doing because our residents deserve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. I know that Councillor Goss will particularly look forward to seeing PDP. I sense a red pen coming out immediately. Thank you very much, Dave. That's very well said. Alison.
I think Councillor Harris has actually just covered most of the ground, but what I was going to say was there's not much to add to a detailed and very persuasive background paper. But being elected as a councillor brings with it responsibilities to speak for our residents and make good decisions on a wide range of issues, from housing to finance, which requires us all to commit to build on skills and knowledge, and for council to commit to support and develop us. As a new councillor, induction briefings and finance workshops have been a way of building knowledge quickly with easy access via online learning, and I really appreciate the team in providing this support. Charter and Charter Plus framework shows investment in those representing them in a public way, and councillors, I feel, have a responsibility to welcome ongoing development as part of their role. I recommend that we support the paper.
Thank you. Colleagues?
Agree.
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 Kaylee, you wanted to speak on the next item, the MDG annual report. I guess it'll get into training as well, if I understand correctly.
Yes. So long, those chairs are hard, so I'm doing well. Given the underspend on last year's members' development, can I ask why no member for any party was nominated for the Leadership Academy? I would also ask why members were not aware of this opportunity, given the number of new members, as Alison has pointed out, that were elected in the last 2 years. Given the underspend from last year, I would ask the full council nominates 2 members to attend the Leadership Academy course this year at the earliest opportunity, so that members are prepared to take on leadership roles as they present themselves.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for hanging on for us. Thank you very much for raising the issue. The answer narrowly would be that the members who represent their groups on the MDG and who I'll walk through these things, certainly in my time, I've been once our representative on a previous year. We're reminded of what the programme, what the opportunities are, but I think there's a bit of learning for us about making sure that we share that across all councillors, and that's an action we can take so that we don't just rely upon busy people who are spending some time to talk through, and as described by colleagues here tonight, doing that in a thoughtful way. We'll make sure we reinforce the messaging. I think that's fair. In terms of specifics and the leadership development you've just touched on, my personal view is we should be open to looking at what the needs should be now for the coming year, revisit that, I think, in the MDG, alive to the budgets that are available. But I'd be easily persuaded that if there is the demand, and we do have around this table, regardless of your age, new experiences can require refreshment and support and reinforcement. And sometimes, with respect to those who are younger than others, age itself is not always a proof of surety or assurance. So help and support for anyone of any age, not just a new councillor or a young councillor, but anybody of any age, I think is the right approach. So we can restart this again, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's refresh it and have a look. Alison, I know you'll keep an eye on this, and we'll pick this up offline. Thank you for raising it. Mark.
Yeah, I'm always encouraging anyone to go on the leadership course. I've been on the leadership course myself for the LGA and surprised at how good it was. I then went on the leaders leadership course, which was even better. So I'm sure we'll definitely put someone through that particular course today. This year. I can think of people today that I can put on. What I just want to say as well is thanks again to Richard, Clifford, and to the team that work with him and support him, because this links to the item before that the member development group talk through those different briefings, talk through what is offered to councillors, and I think we have a really good offer. I still think becoming a councillor is a baptism of fire, is jumping in at the deep end. Quite often you have to learn through experience, but everything that is offered here, the numbers of briefings that Councillor Harris referred to earlier, and the support we get from our democratic team, I just wanted to put on the record, is fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you, that's really well said. Alison, do you want to move the report?
Yes, I just move to accept the report and offer thanks for the members that have taken part. I think it was a really useful and positive document.
Okay, thank you. And we content?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, that's the point at which we can close the shutters on the masses of public attendance, online or otherwise. Thank you. You and yes, this is one of the finest things for any deputy. Go for it, Mark.
Thank you. I haven't done it for a few years, so let's see. I move that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the local authorities brackets executive arrangements brackets meetings and access to information brackets England brackets regulations 2012, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the following items as they involve likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of the Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972.
Agree.